Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry, good
Recording in
morning, ladies and
progress.
gentlemen. Best wishes for all of us. Shalom, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, Salam Kebajikan. Welcome to the International Conference on Environmental Learning Educational Technologies. First of all, let's say thanks to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala who has been giving us mercy and blessings so we can gather today with a good condition and happy situation. Praise and salutation upon our Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the best figure of this universe. I'm Citra Asri Maulidina as your master ceremony for this event. Honorable, a Dean from Faculty of Education, Professor Dr. Fahru Rozi, MPD, Honorable Vice Dean for Academic, Dr. Wirdahanim, MPSI, Honorable Vice Dean for General Affairs and Finance, Dr. Murni Winarsi, MPD, Honorable Vice Dean for Students Affairs, Dr. R.A. Murti Kusuma, MSI, Honorable to all Dean from Faculty of Education, Honorable the Head of Senat Universitas Negeri Jakarta, Profesor Dr. Hafid Abbas, and also our speakers for this seminar today, and Honorable our speakers today, Honorable all of professor and lecturers in Faculty of Education, and also best greetings for all of audience. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's open this event by saying Basmalah together. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. In this beautiful moment, we would like to welcome our moderator today. Please welcome Mrs. Ade Dwi Utami, MPD PhD, who can lead us. For the first speaker, Dr. Tiffany from University of Wollongong. Mrs. Ade, the floor is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, everyone, ladies and gentlemen, and distinguished guests. I'm very honored here to be with you as a moderator today for our very first session of Icelet, International Conference on Environmental Learning Educational Technologies. And today, we already have our beloved speakers with us. Dr. Tiffany Apps is our first speaker. I think we can welcome her in our session. Hello, good morning, Dr. Tiffany. How are you doing?
Good morning, everyone. I'm very, very well. Or should I say Salamat Pagi? Is that correct? I hope I've got it close enough.
Yes. And we welcome you here virtually with us in Jakarta, Indonesia. We hope one day you can be in person with us in this kind of occasion here.
Yes, it would be very lovely to be visiting Jakarta today. But unfortunately, I'm at home in my office. But I'm looking forward to sharing with you and taking part.
Yeah, and before we start your presentation, I would like to introduce you to our beloved participants here that be with us in the location in Jakarta and also online. I would like to read your biography if you don't mind here. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Tiffany Apps is a senior lecturer at the School of Education. She is the Associate Academic Program Director, Digital Technologies for Learning and Co-Head Postgraduate Studies. Tiffany's research explored the digital practice of children, young people, and adults across everyday and education contexts. Tiffany's work critically engaged with particular digital discourses in education and the impact of educational technologies of schools paying attention to the way that children, parents, and teachers engage with digital system, platform, and tools. Tiffany has extensive experience in education, particularly in the design of delivery of transition pedagogy and teaching in educational sociology, educational technology and research method in initial teacher education, postgraduate education, and also teacher professional learning. Her expertise in education spans across the context, including school, educational education, and higher education. And at the moment, you are opening for master and PhD supervision. So we do hope our participant also from our alumni, and one day you will have one of the students from Indonesia, hopefully. Some of Dr. Tiffany's research output in educational technology that recently have paper on digital competence for emergency remote learning in higher education, understanding the present and anticipating the future. And also the last two is valuable data using walkthrough methods to understand the impact of digital learning platform in Australian primary school. And today, we will have Dr. Tiffany to talk with us about digital technology for learning in higher education. Dr. Tiffany, we will have around 1 hour for our session, and we will have around 15 minutes for our discussion. To save the time, now I will hand it over to you. Time and place is yours.
Well, thank you. Thank you for such a warm introduction and background. I'm just going to share my screen now and get my presentation up and ready to go. And I'll ask you very kindly.
Dr. Tiffany, are you ready?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Can you see I'm sharing my... I'm just going to stop that share, and I'm going to share again to make sure I've got in presentation view. Can you see that screen?
Yes, we can see that screen now in the full version.
Beautiful. Thank you. Yeah. Sometimes the transitions aren't so seamless. I've got a little bit of back chatter happening. Why am I seeing? Okay, can we see the screen? Yep, I noticed there was participants floating over. Okay. So thank you for introducing me. My name is Dr. Tiffany Apps, and I am from the University of Wollongong. And what a great privilege to be here at the International Conference on Environmental Learning Educational Technologies in Jakarta. I would like to begin by acknowledging country that I'm on here today in Australia. So this is an image of my hometown, Woonona, just north of Wollongong and south of Sydney, for those who are familiar with the east coast of Australia. Importantly, this is Darawal country. Darawal people are the First Nations people of Australia. It's home to the Darawal, Wadi Wadi and Yuins people, and I want to acknowledge and respect their continuing culture and the contribution they make to the life of the city, the region and the country that I live, love, work and play on. Okay, so my afternoon and your morning, I've been invited to talk about digital technologies for learning in higher education. And so to do this, we must begin by understanding the state of play in contemporary higher education systems. And many of us are very familiar with the state of play because we are part of those systems. We know that post COVID-19 pandemic, there's been an increase in sort of student-centred modes of blended and online learning in higher education. We've seen an emergence of new learning technologies that I've put in inverted commas there, and increased demands on learners and teachers. The state of play, I guess, is really clearly acknowledged in the conference preamble as a learning ecosystem. So I thought, what better place to start than with that background? And you can see I've captured that here, that a learning system includes all components that come together in a learning environment. And that can be in one place, but it can be dispersed across time and space as well with technology. And all of those components come together to support and possibly constrain learning. So in order to understand how a system can be flexible and agile, as in the preamble, I think today it's important to focus on 3 of those components, many more components in a learning environment. But the 3 components that I'll focus on are the idea of a new learning technology, digital literacy, and self-regulated learning. And I guess throughout my presentation, I will argue that we must think critically about the technology itself. And we really need to focus on students' digital literacies and self-regulated learning in order to design sustainable and meaningful technology integrated learning. So let's begin with the idea of new learning technologies or digital technologies that we deploy in our education systems. Commonly, we refer to these as learning technologies or educational technologies. But I would like us to consider the role that these technologies play in a learning ecosystem. And I'll present 2 case studies based on some of the research that I've been engaging with my colleagues here at UOW, international and domestic colleagues as well. So let's think about these new learning technologies through the lens of digital technologies for learning, digital tools, systems, and platforms. And let's also think about new technologies for learning through the lens of the generative artificial intelligence conversation that's happening in much of the discourse around learning and technologies at the moment. So new technologies for education, and you'll see that I've italicized that "for" there because one of the key points that I want to make is many of the technologies that intersect with our education spaces across all education sectors are designed for education rather than by education. So post-COVID, we've seen a growth in the ed tech market, and that could be easily described as an exponential growth that's been documented by many scholars. They are designed for education, and they're underpinned by contemporary digital technologies, importantly, are underpinned by a corporate logic rather than by an educational logic or education values. In the past, we've seen these tensions in schools between different logics, but contemporary education technologies have become so valuable because they're built on an extraction architecture. And that means that they're designed to extract data from children, adult learners, educators, and they derive economic gain through teachers and students' data. In the case study here, there's a QR code there. If you're interested, you can follow to this paper, and it was mentioned earlier. We look closely at the way digital platforms or digital technology learning tools intersect with classrooms. And we do that by using a walkthrough method with educators. And what we found in this study is that the tool was designed for the classroom. It was clearly designed for education using education as a market to make money from children's data, teachers' data, and families' data. And while the platform offered a powerful solution in reading instruction, when we looked closely and analysed against well-known learning theories and pedagogies, we see that it provided a very narrow representation of what learning was. In fact, in one of the platforms in this paper, time spent on screen was used as a proxy for reading, which is highly problematic because we know that when we have a screen open, we may not necessarily be reading. And these representations of learning were shaping practice in the classroom and understanding of learning. And although educators were critical of these narrow representations, they did default back to using the dashboards in these digital tools to talk to their families about learning as well. So we know that there are really here at play some competing values with the corporate sector and the educational sector, and we must begin to ask questions about the nature of these tools and whether they're in the best interests of our learner and how they support the agency of teachers and children, and in the case of the school sector, I would say families as well. So I like to talk about learning technologies as power. So in the case of the paper presented previously and an emerging body of work in the field of digital sociology, there is work that scrutinises this power associated with the learning technologies and highlights the impact that they have on the learning ecosystem. So as I said just a moment ago, that these learning technologies can promote certain pedagogical approaches, and they may not be the way that the sector is looking to shape learning. How do they align with the pedagogical approaches of the classroom, of the subjects and the programs that they're embedded in? And then importantly, that the platform, the activity with the tool, with the app, the website and the platform, that engagement, the engagement as time on screen is produced as legitimate knowledge about learning or data in a dashboard. And there are really tangible impacts across a range of different learning platforms on the way that they make visible certain types of learners and certain types of learning behaviour, the way that they treat teachers and students. So importantly, what we're seeing across the board when we look at these tools is there is an increase in digital labour. So we initially had hoped that technologies would decrease our labour and automate processes, but many of these platforms engage input of data from teachers and sustained use, which increases their labour. And then some key impacts on professionalism. We must remember that data is used underneath all of this, that data is used and exchanged by the platform. So we need to ask critical questions about what is acceptable and where we're happy to give and take in this exchange of using these tools. Some common examples of platforms in higher education that are underpinned by an extraction architecture are Turnitin or proctored exam platforms. Turnitin as a plagiarism detection tool sits in many LMSs. It's important to remember that the tool profits greatly from the labour of students and educators, and it recently, I'm going to say about 4 to 5 years ago, sold off the profit of that through the input of their assignment data. Many institutes use this tool in the higher education sector, and when we start to look closely, we can think about the impacts that a tool like this might have on assessment design, feedback provided, focus of feedback, and the treatment of our students. So what can we do when we think about digital technology tools and we look beyond the hood and we see that there are some practices, that there are corporate interests, extraction architecture that doesn't possibly align with the vision of education and the values of an education system? It's very important that we think about reviewing the scope, design, and purpose of using these tools. Do we have a good reason for using them? And ask critical questions. Questions that we have been working with in our Technical Democracy Collective in Australia are thinking about how learning is represented by the tools and how is it misrepresented. How are users being students and educators, treated or mistreated through the production of data in these tools, and who becomes visible or invisible in this practice, and what does that mean for the pedagogy that is happening in the higher education classroom? Thinking about students' agency, importantly, how is students' privacy protected in using these tools, and then the idea of access and equity. This is not new. We need for all of our students to be able to materially access these resources, but effectively access the resources as well. So how are we supporting that? Importantly, when we think about these things and ask these critical questions, there are some ways that we can move forward in a constructive way, because the use of technologies is critical in order to meet the needs of our learners and develop their skills for the future so they can participate effectively in the workforce and in their lives, because technology is a central part of contemporary society. When choosing new learning technologies, it is important that we reposition pedagogy as central. Often it's really easy to get caught up in the hype, and we've seen lots of that recently around new technologies. But if we reposition pedagogy as central, we can look at our core focus and then choose appropriate technologies to meet those demands. And then we want to think about understanding the learning demands that the technology places on learners, and also understand and design supports for learning. And this begins with knowing who our students are and the skills that they bring to the classes that we cater for. I can see that we've got a hand raised. Perhaps we'll leave the questions to the end, so maybe take a note and then I can come back. So we'll move on to my second lens of looking at new technologies, and how could I talk about new technologies without talking about generative AI, because it is such a hot topic in education and broader society at the moment. In higher education, when we think about generative AI as a technology for learning, much of the discourse has really focused on issues of academic integrity and assessment design. But there are real issues associated with access, and as I said before, access being material, so physical access to being able to sign up for a ChatGPT account or to access many of the tools that use the ChatGPT API. And then effective access being the competencies required to be able to manipulate this tool to use it to your benefit. Also, environmental impacts and ethics. So much of the debate around academic integrity has touched a little bit on ethics in terms of how we design assessments and what is the future of an essay in higher education, but far less conversation about the environmental impacts. When we're using a tool that is so data hungry, requires mass storage of data, there are huge impacts for the relatively low value output that we're getting at the moment from a generative AI tool that are very important to consider and weigh up in your decision to use these tools, but very important to talk to our students about when we're using these tools or learning about the tools. Importantly, in all of this discussion, there is little evidence about how learners understand and may you already use generative AI. We have little evidence to see the impacts that it might have on classroom learning because the tool is so new. We have begun, in context of this, a key driver of my work at UOW is really to understand the students' experience, understand their practices with technology. And so we've begun to study Australian university students' understanding of generative AI and intentions to use it in their study, intentions to use AI in their studies. We have a manuscript that's almost finished on this at the moment, which I'll share some of that raw data from that paper. Some of the other work that we're doing, importantly, to understand the way students use generative AI is that we're looking at how they are using it. So we're working with them over study sessions and getting them to reflect back on their process, looking at their engagement with the tool and capturing that to see the way that different students use the tool and the skills that they bring to the tool. And also we're extending our work, and I'll talk about self-regulation towards the end of the presentation, but we're thinking about the ways that a tool like generative AI may be able to may be able to be used for cognitive offloading in a learning process, and potentially is there a shared regulation of learning that might go on between human and machine? And they're some of the things that we're currently investigating. So when we do look at what students are doing with AI, importantly, we know that they're already using these tools, and they're using existing tools with AI embedded in the tools. So you can see here that a large amount of students in the Australian sector are using Google Translate, and that may be to translate because they're international students, and to translate and to help to digest materials. We have a big chunk using text editing tools such as Grammarly, and in our universities in Australia, many universities embed these tools within the LMS systems to support students. So we are advocating that they use AI tools already. 22% of our sample of students were already using ChatGPT, and we took this sample at the beginning of this year. So the beginning of our session around February to April, we conducted this survey. And then we see a smaller percentage using summarizing and paraphrasing tools. Now, these tools all have AI already embedded in them, so students are already using these tools. When we asked them what they were doing with the generative AI, we wanted to look really closely at those students who were using generative AI. Some of the things that they are doing, and those short-term uses are listed here on this slide. And really interesting, many of them do give us clues about a cognitive offload in learning. And they give us clues about perhaps that there's some self or shared regulatory processes happening, hence why we're further investigating this area. I think it's really interesting that in all of the discourse that we've seen around academic integrity and concerns around plagiarism, that many of the students aren't looking to outright plagiarize their writing. They're looking for scaffolds for their learning in a complex learning environment. Importantly, this helps us to think about how we might integrate these tools in a meaningful way. So we often have this advocacy for moving with the innovation, introducing the new tool, but in education spaces, we need to know how students might be engaging with them in order to effectively integrate them. So the central to this is understanding students' existing skills and knowledge, which brings me to this idea of AI competencies. And so as a digital literacy researcher, I'm still sitting on the fence with whether I think we could have AI literacy in itself. I feel that the competencies around AI are quite distinct, yet they do fit within a digital literacy framework. But important to draw them out to support educators and learners to understand what they are, so that they can develop their skills in an effective way. So importantly, we must not assume students have competencies with AI. We know they're using it, but we don't know what skills they bring to that. One of the preliminary findings from the paper that I'm working on at the moment is that we do see a relationship, quite a strong relationship between self-reported digital literacy and self-reported AI competencies. So what that means is that students who have strong digital literacy had strong AI competency, and the reverse in fact is true. Those who had low levels of self-reported digital literacy had low levels of self-reported AI competencies. And when we begin to think about the use of AI in this way, we can see that there's the potential for further digital inequities to be produced without clear instruction on how to use the tools if we're embedding them in our learning ecosystems. Students' self-reports of their knowledge and confidence in AI showed that they did have a limited knowledge, and that they were learning those basic functions only through experimentation, which, to be fair, at the beginning of the year, many of us were doing. And one of the very clear outcomes was that students really wanted to learn more, and they wanted support from their higher education institutions around that. Distinct in the context that I come from is that we banned ChatGPT. It's banned for use in assessments, although there is a caveat to that, and that is that if an instructor in an assessment description allows the use of the tool, then they are allowed to use it. But that has created a lot of confusion. Students feel like it's very risky, and they're very unsure what is the right and what is the wrong thing to do. So when we think about embedding new technologies into the learning system, you'll see that I'm coming back to these principles that I talked about in terms of choosing new learning technologies with a critical lens, thinking about if we are looking for a sustainable long-term practice that is centered around the student and the pedagogy, we are asking these questions, and we're coming back to that repositioning of pedagogy as central, and thinking about the learner demands and what are the supports that we're designing around this learning for students to be able to complete the learning task, but also to be able to use the technology effectively. If we take this approach and apply these simple principles, it ensures that we provide opportunities for learning about technology while learning with technology in meaningful and authentic ways. And it also ensures that we're designing learning that doesn't leave learners behind, develops their agency, which is critically needed for a more democratic learning technology design. At the moment, we see the technologies designed for education rather than with education. And I think this is the space that we need to be moving into, where we look at the rights of users by design, and we design with educators to design rich, meaningful technologies that support rich representations of learning. The second component, and I said at the beginning I'd talk about three, the second component of a contemporary learning ecosystem that I will talk about today, not the only, is digital literacy. And that is the digital literacy of learners. Now, not to say that the digital literacy of educators isn't important, but given that I have a short time to talk with you today, I wanted to focus on learners. Before I move into that focus, I think it is critically important that we think about and we support the digital literacy of our educators, the teams that we work with across our programs in our sector. We saw the impact of emergency remote teaching and the mass pivot to different modes of delivery. We saw the real impacts that had. We were able to support educators, but critically reflecting on what we've learned from that period is really important. And meeting our teams where they're at and thinking about their well-being and focusing on quality innovation rather than quantity innovation is definitely a key learning from that period. So as teachers' digital literacy or educators' digital literacy is diverse, complex and contextual and requires development, so does our students. And we must think about this when we're designing any learning with digital technologies or looking to integrate any technologies in a meaningful, long-term and sustainable way. So I'm afraid to start with this because I'm afraid to talk about this, but we have this idea, this pervasive popular discourse around the digital native that has been disproven by academic research over the last 15 years, over and over and over. There's something about this idea or this popular discourse that is easily entered into our imaginations, and I can say that as I visit school staff rooms and I engage in professional learning in sectors, we do hear this kind of idea that young people, they know how to do it. They've been raised with technology. They're way better than I am. And I would argue very strongly that this is a really dangerous myth. Because while young people have grown up with technology, their experiences with technology is very diverse and dependent on the context in which they engage in and their cumulative technology experiences and possibilities that have been made available to them across their lifetime. In this chapter here that I've popped the QR code with, we focus on the idea of the digital native and we look at the way these cumulative experiences across the lifespan impact learners as they arrive in a higher education sector. And we highlight that diversity and the associated learning needs and the ways that we may be able to cater for them. So my argument is that the sustainable use of digital technology in higher education supports learners with diverse digital literacy. So those who are quite competent and those who are very new, again here to learn with technologies, but when we're integrating technologies into our practice, how are we supporting learners to learn about those technologies and build their digital literacy? If we're serious about producing competent, future-proof graduates, then learning about technologies is key. And we see that as we study transition post-university into the workforce. Many of the struggles around digital literacy are at that basic competence level because learners haven't been learning about technologies too. So when we come to embed the learning technologies in our higher education learning system, again, here is the reminder, let's make it purposeful. Select those technologies that align with the purpose and pedagogical approach. jumped ahead and said we want to focus on quality learning technologies over quantity. So rather than choosing a mass of tools across, embedding a mass of tools across your LMS, focus on a couple and focus on them well. And then this one is tricky in a higher education sector, connecting with what students know. When we're catering for such large cohorts, it can be really tricky. So ways to do this, particularly as students transition into university and that we have those big cohorts, ways to collect prior knowledge and experience is to have discussions. If you have smaller classrooms, you might conduct surveys to get a snapshot of their digital literacy. And then it's clear to see what kinds of groups of students and experiences they've had before. And then you can connect to those learners in your programs through modelling processes in the lecture. So when we're introducing a new software or tool, modelling that, verbal think alouds in self-paced materials and tutorials, including links to how-to guides and tutorials can be really empowering for students and help them to use those technologies in meaningful ways. And worked examples are also really powerful as well. And if we're aiming to build digital literacy, if we want digitally literate graduates, how are we actually supporting and assessing this process in our assessment of learning and in our learning outcomes at a subject level, but also at our program level? So are we looking for some future-proof graduates? And if so, how are we embedding the building of digital literacy skills and perhaps now AI competencies across our programs? So reviewing at that individual level and across a program level is really powerful in ensuring we're supporting the development of these digital literacy skills and our future-proof graduates. Okay. I need to take a little sip of my water because I think I'm moving through really quickly.
Yes, take your time, Dr. Tiffany.
Okay, so this brings me to the final component of that I want to talk about within the contemporary higher education learning ecosystem. These aren't the only three components, but three that I've chosen today that are associated with our body of research from University of Wollongong and connecting across the world. And this one is self-regulated learning. And so this is one of my favourite research areas because we are doing some very novel research in this area. Self-regulated learning comes from a psychology background, a long tradition in schools. We're looking at it now in the higher education sector, but we are really looking at it in context of digital tasks and digital learning designs. And the reason that we're looking at it in this way is to see where are the opportunities to support students' self-regulated learning. We look at self-regulated learning research in a very different way to many scholars. Our body of research includes many of the quantitative measures that are synonymous with self-regulated learning research, but the novel we know, here's another reminder, we all know that contemporary learning environments in higher education are complex, particularly at that transition point. There are pinch points when they become more complex, and I'm very interested in transition across a lifetime, and much of my research has looked at those transition points. But as young learners come into our higher education sector, or any learner comes into our higher education sector, what they're doing is really grappling with a whole range of new demands. Some of them are academic and some of them are social, as they adjust to the expectations or the rules of the game of higher education. So the addition of learning technologies in these environments can be a really wonderful support, but they can also add a range of complexity and different learning demands to learners. So if we can understand the way that some learners are able to self-regulate their processes, their learning processes in a natural and authentic, by that I mean just a real university environment, then it allows us to think about the ways we can support learners. And what I'm talking about here is good learning design. So let's jump in to explain what self-regulated learning is for those of you who aren't familiar with the model. There are numerous models of self-regulated learning, and we work with Hadman and Wynn's model in this project, and recently we've been working with more contemporary models around co-regulation and shared regulation. So we know that self-regulated learning is a series of iterative processes. It's cyclical and iterative that a learner may or may not engage in when completing a learning task. Self-regulated learning research has traditionally been associated with study, and some of the more contemporary outputs of this research focus on learning tasks. Assessment tasks in higher education provide a really good opportunity for us to look at self-regulated learning in action. And we do know that students with higher levels of self-regulated learning typically perform better at their studies than students with lower levels. Key point here is that it's not static. So students can learn to self-regulate, which is wonderful news for us educators. But something that I'd really like to iterate in terms of my personal philosophy of education is that self-regulated learning is not the sole responsibility of the learner. There are many things that we can do as instructors and educators and designers to support self-regulated learning throughout the learning process. And importantly, if we're looking at doing that, paying attention to the nature of tasks that we set for students is important. And it's a really significant sort of pinch point in triggering self-regulated learning processes for students. So in the studies that I'll talk about today, I've just chosen 2 papers to share with you from this big study. But in this study, we really wanted to look at the nature of tasks in higher education. And this study, importantly, was conducted prior to COVID, but the findings are really significant now post-COVID, given that we spend more time structuring digital learning environments and bringing in learning technologies with our students. Many of the students in Australia have really benefited from the flexibility of online modes of learning or blended modes of learning. So in many cases, we sort of pivoted back to face-to-face, but now we're looking for opportunities to bring in the flexibility that online and blended modes can afford, because very clearly the students are telling us that they really appreciate those modes of learning in terms of balancing all of the demands of their lives. So we think when we think about those modes of learning, they are more complex spaces because there's less opportunity for immediate feedback from the instructor. We're not here in this relational dialogue. Time is stretched and shortened in many ways, and there's space between us. So it does create more complexity for educators in that face-to-face way to support students. And then when we look at open-ended tasks, so online assessment tasks that are open-ended or ongoing, they're non-traditional, they look a bit different. They might be a blog post or using the LMS to have a discussion. They could be a range of different open-ended tasks. They are more likely for students to require students to self-regulate because of the complexity. They need to engage in that process of reflection, monitoring, checking in, setting small goals, checking in again, iterative model of self-regulated learning. So this study that I'll talk about 2 papers from this study, just importantly to sort of position it. This is how we followed students We looked at their learning intentions at the beginning of the session, so prior to the task. So this study was conducted across 4 Australian universities, across 30 different subjects. We had a very large cohort of survey students, and then we had a smaller cohort of 160 case students. And those case students, we followed them across the task period. We also looked at the teachers' pedagogical intentions and the teaching team's pedagogical intentions. And then we followed the students during the task, and then after the task as well. And we use that task as a trigger for their metacognitive reflection on their self-regulated learning processes. So the study, I guess, is really novel in itself because we conducted interviews with these students at these 3 points in time, in-depth, long interviews with them around the task, which isn't common in this field of research. And then we analysed them both deductively and inductively for emerging themes, but we were really importantly looking at processes of self-regulated learning. We were very interested in task understanding, which is a key process in self-regulated learning, and then the contextual factors that supported self-regulated learning being really related to the learning environments, the digital learning environments in which the tasks were designed and presented in. So to share with you today, in order to think about the way we might sustainably structure these digital learning environments for high quality learning, these ecosystems, I'm going to share with you some findings about task understanding, task challenges, and strategies that students were able to engage in, and then the way that the digital learning environment and digital technologies can be manipulated to act as supports for students. So task understanding is a really interesting area of this research and very interesting to anyone who's working in an education space. We set a task for students, we write out a description, we share it with them. In a digital learning environment, we might share it in multiple ways. Perhaps we'll have a video explaining it, we'll give some elaborated instructions, there may be a rubric. Interpreting that task is actually quite a complex undertaking. And if you've taught students in a higher education sector, you'll know that you get lots of questions about the assessment task. In a self-regulated learning framework, Alison Hadwin has published 3 levels of task understanding, which are really useful for instructors actually to think about what the students are doing when they're understanding the task. We deployed these in this study, and we deploy them in our practice at UOW across our Digital Technologies for Learning program. So really quickly, the 3 levels are the explicit features of the task, and the explicit features of a task are things like the word count, the genre, the assessment rating, the things that are explicitly outlined in the description and their key components. Then we have the implicit features of the task, and the implicit features at a higher level are associated with the educator's values, perhaps the course learning outcomes, the things that are implied that we would like the student to know by doing the task. So the easiest way to think about it is the purpose of the task. And then at a socio and contextual level, they're the broader disciplinary values, the values of your program that shape how the subject or the unit might have been designed, where the students are going to, and they're harder to understand. So students who have a really good understanding of a task are able to talk about all of those things. They get a sense of the purpose of the task, why they're doing it in context of the subject and the program, the discipline that they're in, and they understand the explicit features. In this study, we found that 84% of students, when they were asked to describe the task that they were doing, focused on the explicit details, which is not surprising. And we see this over and over. If you're an instructor, you'll know that many of the questions are about these things that you get on task. And then fewer students were able to identify the implicit features of the task, and much fewer the socio-contextual features. Most students' interpretations of the tasks were incomplete, and there was evidence of misinterpretation in most. And importantly, in this paper, we look at task understanding, but then we look at the way task understanding supports high quality goal setting as a process of self-regulated learning and monitoring that process and working on the task. And we found that students' task interpretations are aligned with the quality of the goals that they're able to set. Our findings around the challenges that students face then were unsurprising. In this subsample of 101 students, we found that most of them, the largest group of them, were having problems with knowledge of the task, how they were able to interpret the task. And then the second largest group here was around task conditions. Now, this category really is about the context of the task. So much of this context was associated with the way that the task was presented in an online space and how they might have to share in an online space or interpret the online space. So in this respect, the digital learning environment created much confusion for students, or angst, or feelings of being unsure, self-identified challenges. And the good news is that students who did face challenges were able to enact a range of strategies, and I've called them social strategies, to support their learning. And these social cues that were online social cues, so manipulating the digital environment to support students, were really significant for students. So things that were happening online, like viewing other students' work. So when we were sharing work in a discussion forum, and getting feedback in a discussion forum in between classes, having those interactions were really important in helping students to build their confidence and get a clearer, better task understanding, overcome those challenges, and do better in the assessment task. In-class and peer discussions were also really important. So importantly, the online space was a very good support for their learning, but it didn't replace that face-to-face interaction that we have. So working together across that hybrid space worked very well for supporting students with their task challenges. And just highlighting there again that point that digital learning environment can be really powerful in supporting students by creating those social cues to help them with their task understanding and provide formative feedback. So what does self-regulated learning tell us about embedding new learning technologies in our higher education learning ecosystem? And in terms of digital task design and digital environment design, there are a few key things that we can take away and apply in our own contexts. The first one is building an awareness of task understanding with your teaching teams and clearly communicating the task features at the explicit, implicit, and socio-contextual level. Across our Digital Technologies for Learning program, we have been able to engage some strategies for doing this. So in all of our online task descriptions, we include a purpose statement, the purpose of this task, and then we provide the explicit details. We make sure that in every place that we present that task description, it's consistent with the purpose and the task details. And then across our programs, postgraduate and undergraduate programs, we now, when we introduce the task, engage students in an activity where we look at together the explicit, implicit, and socio-contextual levels. We do a bit of a deconstruction. And so students get used to doing that process, and then it helps them to think about the task in broader terms than just the word count or just the genre. So they're thinking about the purpose and the why, and they're really able to position their task at that higher level to meet the criteria that we as instructors have. I would also say that to the point about building awareness with teaching teams, that sharing that commonly across can be really helpful, because the way that we come to interpret a task across teaching teams can actually be quite different. And this is a great exercise to engage in with teaching teams, particularly when they're the teams that I work with. I have teams of 12 or 15 teaching staff. So being able to come on this, be on that same page at the beginning of a task period through that task design is really helpful, right through into marking, moderation, and giving feedback. The key point here in context of thinking about digital learning in higher education is that digital learning environments can offer opportunities for task design that can trigger or facilitate self-monitoring of a task. So tasks that are multi-stage and ongoing, that share student work, that might embed a prompt around their thinking around a stage of the task. But also where are the interactions and formative feedback from teachers. So rather than waiting till the end and when the assessment is marked, how can we design in our online experiences a formative feedback period wrapped around that task? And the last point here is avoiding overly complex task designs. And I think this is quite important in the context that we're in. Many of the responses to generative AI are to come up with some really different kind of assessment tasks to design out the potential use for generative AI. And I think we should be cautious with thinking in that way. Just to be cautious, I'm not advocating that we might think about designing our tasks differently, but we must be cautious, because if we make a task overly complex, we're placing greater demands on students' self-regulatory processes, and that can be complicated in causing challenges that perhaps are unnecessary along the way. Okay, so that brings me to the end, and I always like to end with where I started. So to return back to the beginning, and what are the key takeaways from sharing this broad body of research across these three different components of a rich learning ecosystem? Importantly, not the only components, but what are the key takeaways from sharing this work today? So I think importantly, if there are three things to remember, is that we must think critically about the technology itself and the things that it does to learners. So the learners that we work with, they're not data subjects, they're learners, and how can we protect them and choose quality tools over quantity tools to make sure that we're supporting our students' agency. I think the second takeaway is focusing on the learning demands of those tools and the digital environment to support students' digital literacy, but also focusing on the students themselves. What do they bring? What are their experiences? And how can we connect and support their experiences to teach with digital technologies, but also to teach about digital technologies, to ensure that our graduates are future-proofed and they have strong digital literacy skills that they can apply to a range of different technologies as innovations continue to occur. And then finally, the significant role of self-regulation in learning and the significant role that the digital learning environment can play to support students to develop their self-regulated learning skills is not to be understated. And we can see really good designs that can support our learners and really poor designs. When we start looking at those models of self-regulated learning, it's a trigger for educators to think about the way we embed those practices every day. And finally, I think I've got a minute or so to go. I'd like to acknowledge my terrific Digital Technologies for Learning team for allowing me to share the insights from our research and our teaching. So at UOW, we not only research digital technologies for learning, but we deliver undergraduate, postgraduate and professional learning programs that cater for pre-service teachers, school leaders, industry professionals, academic developers, and learning designers. So we're embedding this work in action every day, and we have a wonderful team that comes together to do this. So I'd like to acknowledge them just to end the presentation. And I guess I can hand back over to you all now for questions.
Wonderful, Dr. Tiffany. Thank you very much. And yeah, hope you can hear our applause here in the room.
I can't.
Also,
I can't. But I'll just imagine.
okay.
Well, actually, and I'll stop sharing so I can see you.
Yes. Here you go. Okay, Dr. Tiffany, it was very thoughtful presentation, especially for me. I do really highlighted so many things that you highlight since the first when the COVID pandemic hit us, and then you brought in your presentation the scope design about, and also the critical question that you highlighted here about representation or misrepresentation of the learning and also the user, the student agency, the access. That's kind of like the same problem, especially for me. I faced this, I have two experiences related to the learning because I spent the first years of the COVID pandemic in Melbourne, in Australia, and also I continued the pandemic back to Indonesia because I finished my PhD. That's why I can see like how like the two countries face the chaotic situation, the transition at the first stage in Indonesia, how the teachers deal with that, how the children deal with that, and also the parents. And back to Indonesia, we also faced quite the same situation there. And then what you highlighted, since the mastery, the digital technology, it is important, but then you also related to that, that is not about the digital literacy at the end. It's quite different with the concept. It is really, really bring the new perspective for looking at that, because somehow we can see some understanding about that digital technology and also digital literacy quite same also. So if we master the technology, we are literate in digitally, but it is not so different with the concept that you see. And you also highlighted to the positioning, the importance of the pedagogy, not the skill to only mastery the technology itself. It's very central, and I do really agree with that. And looking at the learning demands, because each level have different things. Maybe like for me, from early childhood education, it's not the academic outcome as the demand of the learning, but how to build the interaction when the children have the learning process to achieve that as the outcome. And also I think some of us here looking at that implementation in the elementary education background, so it's quite different to see how the transitioning from early childhood to the elementary related to the use of the technology, it will become different things here. And also I like the myth you highlighted here, because we also have some kind of dangerous myth as well. For example, in early childhood, we could say like, is that true? Like no screen for babies or under certain age of children allowed? And what about that? Maybe some of the audience will have that concern as well and ask the question about that. And the last one, how we use that, the technology not really to fulfill the assignments from the student itself. Like, for example, you bring the ethics while we develop that skill in related to technology, especially in AI, and then you already took like the plagiarism. I work also in postgraduate level, and somehow AI make the student life is easier than before. We can ask the ChatGPT to develop, hey ChatGPT, could you please make introduction about the digital technology, for example? And it is what happening now with our students. So about the ethics and I think that kind of like skill is very important, and somehow ended up the self-regulated learning. It is really strong with looking at how that the component, the media, the tools can build us ourselves as an independent learner. I think that's a beautiful conclusion to end up seeing your study in that context. And we still have to continue the session, Dr. Tiffany. We will have a question and answer session. I would like to open the opportunities for three audience for the first session, online and also offline. So I would like to invite all the participants with your question. For the online participants and offline participants, you can raise your hand, and then I'm sorry, I have to pick only some of you, okay? For other participants also, you can use the chat box if you want to. Okay, first offline participant we have here. One already raised hand. I would like to open the opportunity for Prof. Yurni from elementary education. Please, Prof. I think the microphone's still off. Dr. Tiffany, please let us know if you cannot hear our voice here.
I can't hear. I can hear your voice, but I can't hear the speaker's voice.
Okay. Sorry. Yeah. Good morning, Tiffany.
Oh, I can hear. Good morning.
Thank you. It's very valuable presentation of you. I'm very glad to come in here to join the sessions, the seminar, so I can hear the very valuable information about technology development in higher education. My name is Yurni. I am teaching mathematics education in primary teacher education. Your speech is remind me about last Saturday. I asked my student to create poster about mathematics theory, math theory for learning mathematics in primary school. It's about 2 hours. During 2 hours the student can finish the test. And wonderful, the design of portrait is very good, poster is very good, and the theory is accurate. After 2 hours, they have to present the result of the group test, and it's not different from your problem about student. They have theory, but they have problem to interpret, to explain the theory, maybe because they just get the theory, they understand the theory in short time. So something they have misunderstanding about the theory. Perhaps you have the same experience about how to make students can understand what they read, what they're talking about in short time. Maybe they have learned the theory maybe 6 months ago or years ago, but when we ask them to present the theory just in time, it makes some mistake. Yeah, they make some mistake to explain the theory correctly. Maybe you have solution. How can we manage the students? How can we clarify the theory in short time too? Maybe you can show us your student result of tests about using technology in finding information so we can share it to our college in higher education. So can we imitate the test to our student too? If you have the sample of the student job, student task, please do so. Thank you. Thank you, and we are ready. Then we are happy to know your information, to hear your information, so we can implement in our class too. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. It sounds like an interesting task and one that, by your own description, the students were challenged by in terms of the way that they were then able to communicate the theory. And so I guess if we were thinking in terms of our self-regulated learning models and the structure of the task, perhaps some things that you could think about would be explaining the purpose of the task. So is it that, and please excuse me if I don't fully understand the whole task, so I'll just sort of talk around it and you can correct me if I'm wrong. But is it that when students are asked to present the task, it sounds to me like they're getting really caught up on that perhaps explicit detail of accurately recounting the theory, and maybe what you're hoping that they are doing is having more of a conversational application of the theory in their classrooms rather than just a recount of the theory. I think that can be tricky for students on many levels, because if we think about the cognitive demands of that task, they one, have to learn the theory in a quick time, and two, they have to then apply it to a setting, which isn't something that you can necessarily grab from a textbook. So it can be tricky sort of cognitively. So I would say in terms of task understanding, communicating the purpose, maybe if your focus is on getting them to apply it to the classroom, really communicating that this task is focusing on the application of the theory and less so on making the space less risky in terms of it being absolutely correct, but focusing on the application. I'd then say, because the task is quite complex and there are two parts of it, and if we think about how we could use the digital environment to support that task, it could easily be broken up into a multi-stage task, where the first stage would be to describe the theory, and then there's some feedback on that in the online space. And that doesn't have to be individual feedback, it can be general feedback to the whole cohort. What are they getting right? What are they getting wrong? Where do you need them to focus their attention? And then the second stage could be to think about a scenario they could apply it to. And then the final stage could be a presentation. So you could run it over 2 or 3 stages. And in designing the task that way and using a learning management system or an online platform to support you to do that, you're creating lots of scaffolds along the way and opportunities for feedback. or for students to monitor, because a key process of self-regulated learning is goal setting and monitoring, and we're monitoring along the way our task understanding and making adjustments. So that would, in terms of self-regulated learning, based on that very short description, that would be my advice in terms of how you might be able to get them to really understand the task, maybe perhaps restructuring it or thinking about how you're communicating the task purpose, because communicating that task purpose is actually a very simple tweak to teaching practice, but can have really powerful impacts on what students produce.
Thank you, Dr. Tiffany and Prof. Yurni, for your question. And Dr. Tiffany, we have one question come up from online participant. I couldn't see the name, I'm so sorry about that, but it is very interesting presentation. Many students today are getting used to AI to do assignment. I am worried that in the future, students' interest in reading will decline. What should teachers do to anticipate that students will continue to actively seek information, not only by relying on AI, but as the only source? It is very interesting, the same concern as mine, I think. So Dr. Tiffany, could you please respond to that?
Yes, this is a really great question, and thank you for asking it. It's really important and really speaks to the heart of the role of educators in preparing children and young people and adults for the future. And when I talk about future proofing, I actually cringe when I say that, because it's one of those catchphrases. But if we're very serious about doing that, we really need to make a commitment to learning about technologies. And I'm afraid, particularly in Australia, it's something that we've become not quite good at. And we can see that in our standardized school test scores. We could do much better in teaching about technologies. And that really is an important lesson for us to learn. And perhaps the stakes become higher with a tool like AI. I'm not sure, because it's so new, and I'm always very cautious in making grand claims. Because one thing that I know working with technology innovations and education over the last 16 to 17 years is that there's always a new technology that's always going to change our world. And we have seen repeatedly that that doesn't ever quite happen. So I'm cautious about making claims around the nature of these technologies until we actually see how they play out in the classrooms. But what I do know from researching digital literacy for a long time is that students need to develop skills to work with these tools. They are a part of our society, whether we like it or not. Generative AI will become increasingly embedded in different tools. So in a Google search or in a Microsoft Bing search, in the apps that we use. So we need to be able to teach them about technologies. And if we're teaching them about technologies with that critical lens that I've put on, that engages a more of a democratic conversation. So, we understand that you will use that source or you'll use generative AI, but when is an appropriate time to use a generative AI tool like ChatGPT? And when does it become risky? And what is it replacing? So when we start to replace things with generative AI, what gaps are we leaving? So these conversations, very young children, right through to university students, are really capable of having and beginning to think about, because technology in a way is shapes the way we interact with our world, with our contemporary world. So building the skills and knowledge to make those processes more democratic is critically important, because at the moment technology is designed by the few for the masses, and few people really understand how to harness it. So what I would like to see is a really consistent and systematic approach to building digital literacy, critical digital literacy, including AI competencies, talking about these technologies in a social, through a social lens. When is appropriate, when's not appropriate, what do we lose, what does it mean for our sense of humanity? These big questions posed to our children, who are the future leaders of the country. Technology should be democratic, and it should not be controlled by the few, I would say. So, like a very deeply philosophical question, and thank you for asking.
Yes, and that's very deep answer, and also related to the your previous slide about the sustainable use of digital technology for learning in supporting learners with different digital literacy to learn with and about digital technology. I think we cannot avoid or stop the digital technology development, but somehow we have to accept, adapt, and then we put meaning in using it. I think you already highlighted all the components that we need to develop the ideal learning with the technology itself. Dr. Tiffany, it is really grateful. Oh, what? Do we still have time? But I cannot refuse the question come up from the most important person here, our next speaker actually. I'm afraid to cut your time, Professor, but if, okay. One more question we have here from Prof. Hafid.
Thanks so much, Tiffany. I love your very beautiful painting on the back side of you. Is it by your painting personally, or?
Oh no, this is just the technology. It's just a background. It's not real.
Anyway, it's just so beautiful anyhow. Well, Tiffany, I was quite mobile in the past to visit, most of your universities across Australia. One day I visited Charles Darwin University in Darwin,
Yes.
Yeah. So the students, quite substantive number Aborigine. And I noticed that at your university you have a cultural center on Aborigine. So would you kindly let us know that how you manage this center? Do you use technology to reach them out? Because I know the size of Australia is a continent, so that's not easy, you see, to reach the unreachable. So, but you could put your heart to those who are, far, far beyond the center of excellence or the urban cities. So that's my, insight from the great university you have, Wollongong University. Thank you, Tiffany.
Thank you, Prof. Hafid. Would you like to respond to that, Tiffany?
Yes, thank you. We are, University of Wollongong has recently been expanding its international footprint, but we do here onshore cater for a range of students from a range of different contexts in regional and rural locations, but also international students who come to stay and learn with us. Many professionals come into my program, my Digital Technologies for Learning program. We have a Master of Education, so we have very diverse students. I would say as a whole, a university, it's difficult for me to comment on the whole university strategy. But in our programs, in our Digital Technologies for Learning programs that I look after, we certainly are very focused on delivering flexible learning. All of our Master of Education is online, and most of our students are geographically dispersed across Australia. We do have a smaller cohort of international students who are on campus, and that's purely for visa reasons. But they do learn flexibly while they're on campus, and then we have that face-to-face interaction as a needs based. But I think you are right. We are a big country. We are very geographically dispersed, and there are many students with really great needs, actually many teachers with great needs in really rural and remote classrooms that have really low access to physical and material access to technologies that could benefit. So it definitely is an area for us to think about how we can connect and bring those diverse students in. So yes, and we do have, and you referred to our cultural centre. We have an Indigenous centre for Indigenous Australians, and we do have other centres to support our international partners and our international students as well.
Thank you. So I think, Professor, we need one kind of like center of excellence for our indigenous people back to Indonesia because we are very rich with that. Yeah, we have a lot of homework. Okay, Dr. Tiffany, this is really wonderful session, and I'm very grateful here to be assigned as your moderator, but I think I have to say, and we have to say goodbye at this time to you. So thank you very much for the lovely presentation, for the thoughtful things that you highlighted in your presentation. We do really hope we still get in touch and future collaboration. We already raised some issue here from educational department and also related to early childhood. It's very open. Also elementary, I think it's the potential. There are potential opportunities for us for still work together. And again, we hope one day we can meet you in person here or either back to Wollongong University. I have to end this session and thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for Dr. Tiffany Apps for your knowledge so we can get some insight right now. And also thank you so much for Miss Ade for leading our discussion today. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, next we have the next agenda is material about current issues for education, technology, environmental in developing countries from Professor Dr. Hafid Habas, who will be moderated by Mr. Nararia Hutamaputra, MPD. So, Mr. Nara Hutamaputra, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Ms. Chitra. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for coming on this amazing event. And it's such an honor for me because this is my very first time moderating the international event like this. And especially we're going to meet with amazing people. Okay, without further ado, I will open my note first. So we are going to meet with amazing speaker after this. Yeah, we are going to talk about National Education Roadmap, realizing a golden Indonesia 2045 ya, 2045. Peta Jalan Pendidikan Nasional mewujudkan Indonesia Emas 2045. And yeah, as we all know that national education in Indonesia, we have so many issues that need to be solved, especially us in developing country. And as academicians, we need to adapt and directly facing the VUCA that, of course, has a big impact to our education, technology, and also environmental. So how it's supposed to be to deal with this current situation and to achieve the Indonesian Golden in 2045. Okay, without further ado, I will tell about our speaker first. I will read the CVs first. So today our speaker is Professor Dr. Hafid Abbas. Dr. Hafid Abbas is one of the professor in community education, Faculty of Education, Universitas Negeri Jakarta. And he is also now head of Senate of Universitas Negeri Jakarta. And I would like to open the CV first. A moment. Okay, so Professor Hafid Abbas, he was pursued the degree in bachelor degree in Universitas Negeri Makassar, and also pursued the master degree in population and environmental education, and also his doctorate in Universitas Negeri Jakarta, and also some non-formal education background in outside of Indonesia, like Syracuse University, if I'm mistaken here, and also the special work experience from, so he was the former commissioner and president of National Commission of Human Rights, the Republic of Indonesia. So without further ado, please welcome and give applause for Professor Dr. Hafid Abbas. Okay, so Professor Dr. Hafid Abbas, we will have 1 hour's presentation, and after that we have a discussion for 15 minutes. Okay, the time is your professor. Yes.
Okay. Okay, thanks so much, Nara. Well, ladies and gentlemen, all participants, both in this room and those who are online, allow me to express my great appreciation to the organizing committee who invited me to share my perspective on this issue. Yeah, because this is a great conference, international conference on environmental learning and educational technologies. Well, this is a reflection that I have shared to the Indonesian Parliament, Komisi 10 DPR RI, quite some times ago. It was 2021, yeah, when the Minister of Education, Nadiem Makarim, put a new policy, a roadmap for Indonesian education for the next 2045. It's a century of Indonesian independence. And then I contributed one article in Kompas News at the time, and also one in the Jakarta Post. So allow me to share what was my reflection during the meeting with the DPR, ya, Komisi 10 DPR RI. So the first, let me share to you about Indonesia in realities. Quite many realities over here we have. So look, this is ASEAN. We have 10 countries all together within Southeast Asian nation. But geographically, Indonesia is the largest size within ASEAN. It's likely more than 60% geographically is the size of Indonesia. Similarly, with the population, with approaching 300 million people, at the moment we are 250 78 million people. So look, we are a great country because geographically it's the largest in the region, and demographically our population is also the top largest in the region. We are the fourth largest in the world anyhow. Very shortly, we are moving into an ASEAN integration. We're expecting 2030, the ASEAN will become a single community of nations, economically, politically, socio-culturally. Probably we will have one single currency. Mungkin satu mata uang saja di lingkungan ASEAN ya, seperti di Uni Eropa ya. Kita juga bebas kemana-mana because we are single community. Culturally, politically, economically. So we have to cope with this new situation within ASEAN and how we prepare our education at this new society within ASEAN integration. It's a one nation. Jadi satu RW di sini nanti di lingkungan ASEAN. But look Indonesia here. So what time now, Pak Nara? 10 in the morning. But in Papua, it's 2 p.m. Right, because we have 3 time zones. Means that we are 1/8 the size of the globe. Yeah, because of, you see the equator, the size of our country in the equator. So if I took a flight from here to Wamena, yeah, Jakarta to Wamena, similarly, the time that I took from Jakarta to Johannesburg in South Africa, it's a great country we have. Compare us Brunei with 300,000 or 400,000 people. So all Bruneian we can keep in one building. Seluruh penduduk Brunei masih bisa lari-lari di satu gedung kalau di Jakarta. Ya Pak nanti bisa di Gelora Bung Karno lah atau di aulanya UPI ya. Look, Indonesia you cannot do so. Singapore, with the size of Singapore before reclamations, our island in the center of the lake, ada pulau kecil di tengah-tengah danau yang kita miliki, itu pulau jauh lebih besar dibanding Singapura. Karena ukuran Singapura sebelum direklamasi hanya 550 km persegi. Ini hampir 700. Tapi sekarang setelah direklamasi, tambahan reklamasinya 2 kali lebih besar dari kota Bandung. Sehingga Singapura sedikit lebih besar dari pulau di tengah-tengah danau namanya Pulau Samosir di tengah Danau Toba. So we have 6,000 islands are now just occupied. 6.000 pulau belum dihuni. Ini negara raksasa. Kita bersyukur. But how to manage education within this great nation? So this is the fact. Well, across the globe we have 193 countries globally, but we are the 4th most unequal country. Negara paling tinggi kesenjangan kaya miskin di dunia keempat after Russia, India and Thailand. Indonesia the 4th largest. Most likely we are moving to the 3rd most unequal. This is very risky. So what education should do to change this extreme, very extreme social gap? Because I know, education is the most powerful weapon in which we can use to reduce the social gap. Yes? So Indonesia is very risky at the moment. So now there's a new publication, and probably our colleagues over here have read this book, Indonesia Rising Divide. We are in danger. Probably we will collapse. Most likely we will be disintegrated like Soviet Union. Probably will disappear from the globe because of the recent World Bank put it here that Indonesia rising divide and will decay from the within. Indonesia itu lapuk dari dalam. That's the World Bank report. Yes, wait a second. There are 4 reasons why World Bank says so. First, because of the policy. Ada kebijaksanaan yang tidak adil. That the verse World Bank says. The second is the quality of Indonesian education. Majority that attended by children, attended by youth, attended by wealth, university student are very low quality. They cannot compete in modern market economy. Tidak bisa bersaing di ekonomi modern karena kualitas pendidikannya rendah. Hanya bisa diserap di sektor informal. Itu kata Bank Dunia penyebab kedua Indonesia akan disintegrasi, bubar. The third reason according to World Bank that currency flow out circulation is very unequal. Duit yang beredar di Indonesia itu hanya dimiliki kelompok kecil saja. Hanya beberapa orang. Yes. And the last is the majority of Indonesian do not have any saving. Gak ada tabungannya orang Indonesia ini. Jadi 4 penyebab itu sehingga Indonesia bisa bubar. Ketidakadilan, manusia Indonesia kualitasnya rendah, duit yang beredar tidak menjangkau ke mereka-mereka ini, dan keempat, mayoritas Indonesia tidak punya tabungan. Itu kata Bank Dunia. Dan Prabowo pernah bilang Indonesia bisa bubar sebelum 2030. So it is our responsibility how to minimize the unequal, how to reduce the gap between the rich, the have, and the have-not. So now let me share to you here. You can see here, this is the an example, the land distribution. Ada 35 juta hektar tanah itu. Itu dimiliki hanya beberapa orang. 35 juta hektar tanah itu sama dengan hampir 600 kali luas Jakarta. Itu hanya dimiliki beberapa orang. Karena luas Jakarta itu hanya 66.000 hektar. Ini 35 juta hektar. Ini laporan KPK, Kementerian Keuangan dan Jaksa Agung. It was published last April 2022. Yeah. Now look, this is another data. Look here, 14 million square hectares. Ini ada tambahan lagi, 14 juta hektar, 14,6 juta hektar. So totally is about 50 million square hectares. 50 juta hektar ini dimiliki hanya beberapa orang. So we are in danger. This is another data. So this person said, come on, we have 4,000 islands. Silahkan diambil ini pulau, 4,000 pulau. Termasuk Pulau Rempang, ya kan? Silahkan diambil. 4,000 pulau ini, pulau yang belum dihuni memang. Ada 6.000 tapi 4.000 itu ukurannya besar-besar. Kita kasih ke negara lain dengan di sini disampaikan silahkan dikelola, silahkan dirubah namanya, dan silahkan dimanfaatkan. Jadi orang luar diundang datang menguasai itu pulau 4.000. Itu kata orang ini. Gitu ya. Dan kita lihat lagi sejumlah provinsi di Indonesia. Ini teman-teman di perguruan tinggi perlu lihat. Luas daratannya dengan luas tanah yang diberikan ke pengusaha-pengusaha ini 2 kali lebih luas atau jauh lebih luas dibanding seluruh dataran provinsi itu. So look here, This is, for instance, Southeast Sulawesi. Ini Sulawesi Tenggara. Jadi kalau ada yang mau gubernur di sana mikir dulu. Tidak ada tanahnya. Tanahnya 2 kali lipat sudah dikasih ke orang asing. Cina, Singapura, Malaysia, kemana. Karena izin itu banyak tumpang tindih. Jadi izin yang kita berikan untuk dikuasai daratan kita itu jauh lebih luas dibanding seluruh dataran itu. Jadi penduduk Indonesia tidak punya lagi tanah 1 sentimeter pun. Karena kebaikan pemerintah memberi tanah itu ke pihak pengusaha dalam dan luar negeri. Sama juga ya Kalimantan Timur. Yang kalau Kalimantan Timur itu yang kuasai pihak Tanoto, pabrik kertas. Sama juga di Kalimantan Utara, sama dengan provinsi-provinsi lain. Mana ada negara yang memberi tanahnya semua sekian kali lipat dibanding seluruh datarannya? Tidak ada di dunia ini selain kebaikan Indonesia. Inilah sungguh-sungguh yang tidak sesuai dengan Pancasila. So we are danger. Apa kita mau seperti ini? Kita hanya jadi penonton di negara kita. Iya Pak Sardi. So what shall we do? ini negara ini betul-betul pendidikannya harus muncul. So this is the data. Ironically, according to President Jokowi said, well, yang menguasai tanah itu duit keuntungan diambil Indonesia dibawa lari keluar. 11,000 triliun. APBN kita hanya 2.000 sekian triliun setahun. Ini berapa tahun kita puasa, dia bawa lari. Tidak taruh di Indonesia. Ini orang bilang ada 80% duit guys ditaruh di Singapura. Singapura ini surga. Dia tidak mau taruh duitnya di Indonesia. Karena dia tidak percaya orang Indonesia itu baik. Dia bawa lari. Jadi di Indonesia itu duitnya kosong. Jadi hanya kotak aja. Tidak ada isinya, tanahnya sudah dikuasai. Kasih. Lihat tragedi Pulau Rempang. Penduduk setempat digusur itu tidak boleh. Itu pelanggaran HAM berat. Kalau mau digusur, dipastikan orang ini pindah ke tempat yang lebih baik. Harus dijamin melalui undang-undang. Tidak boleh hanya kebijakan menteri, harus ada undang-undang. Tidak boleh juga digantikan ini, karena ini sudah sekian ratus tahun ada di situ. Jadi misalnya dilarang orang Betawi tinggal di Jakarta. Itu tidak mungkin bisa. Orang Sunda tidak boleh tinggal di Bandung misalnya. You cannot do so. That's violate human rights. So come on, let's continue it. What's going on here? Bisa? Okay, wonderful. Saya mulai lagi, kok tadi tidak bisa ya? Bisa? Ini sedikit lagi saya mau share data. Oh iya, come on. Jadi we are in danger, Bapak Ibu. Dan di Indonesia itu anehnya memang ekonominya tambah meningkat. Tetapi kekayaan itu meningkat pada orang yang sudah kaya. Gitu. Jadi kalau kekayaannya hari ini sekian triliun, besok kekayaannya bertambah sekian kali lipat. Tapi orang miskin tidak bertambah kaya, orang miskin tetap tertinggal. Ada 4 orang Indonesia, kekayaannya hampir sama dengan setengah penduduk Indonesia. Can you imagine it? 100 juta. Dan ini coba lihat, ini data dari Kementerian BUMN, 56 million small scale company industries are not bankable. Tidak tersentuh di bank, hampir 60 juta penjual bakso, penjual gorengan. Duit beredar hanya di beberapa orang saja, perusahaan raksasa itu. Jadi inilah yang mengkhawatirkan. The gap between the have and the have not, ini di Kompas beberapa bulan lalu, beberapa minggu lalu, semakin melebar. Kita lihat di sini, 14 Desember 2020, 50 orang kaya Indonesia, gitu, 50 saja, 50 bukan 50 perusahaan, only 50 Indonesians, itu kekayaannya ini lebih 48% dari total GDP atau 72% dari semua duit yang beredar di negara ini dimiliki hanya 50 orang. 72% duit beredar hanya di tangannya saja. Mana negara selamat dengan keadaan begini? Inilah berkah pemerintahan yang mementingkan kepentingan mereka, bukan pada pendidikan. So, this is the reality. Saya speed up. Now, what is the implication of this? Kenyataan ini di depan kita. Tapi seperti yang saya lihat kemarin di negara-negara Timur Tengah, kampus itu membisu terhadap kebiadaban yang terjadi di masyarakat kita seperti ini. Kenapa ada satu orang dikasih tanah 9 juta hektar? Lalu DKI waktu gubernurnya Ahok, 193 kali orang miskin digusur. Dia warga negara sah. Kenapa warga di Pulau Rempang harus digusur, lalu yang datang harus orang Cina misalnya? Apakah ini Pancasila? Just and civilized humanity, kemanusiaan yang adil dan beradab, apakah masih ada? Keadilan sosial bagi seluruh rakyat Indonesia, apakah masih ada? Masa tanah 50 juta hektar tanah diberikan kepada beberapa orang? Masa tanah di seluruh provinsi, di berbagai provinsi, seluruh datarannya sudah dikasih ke sini. 4.000 pulau dikasih ke orang lain. Sekarang kita lihat implikasinya. Karena menyangkut keselamatan kita. Right? There are 3 implications over here. Pertama, kemiskinan massal terjadi di mana-mana. Look over here. Ini penggusuran. Ada 18 kelompok miskin yang harus diselamatkan oleh dunia pendidikan. Anak terlantar, orang miskin, petani miskin. Di Jawa, petani tidak punya tanah. Kalau di Sulawesi, petani punya tanah, jadi masih bisa selamat kalau tidak ada beras. Tapi di Jawa, berisiko. Petani itu hanya buruh tani. So we are in danger. Ya kan? Kalau ini terlambat, impor beras, kelaparan massal di Pulau Jawa. Ya mudah-mudahan ada negara yang membantu beras kita. Mungkin terjadi November. Beras sekarang sudah naik di mana-mana. Ya kan? Nah, ini realitas. Ada banyak kebijakan yang perlu kita kritisi. Ya. Dan ini Bapak Ibu, teman-teman semua perlu kita merefleksi. Nah, sekarang kita buat peta jalan baru. So what should we do with this? Dengan segala implikasi itu. Pertama, mari kita mencoba mengaudit. Yeah, so make reflection, assessment on the existing condition of our national education. So how to improve the quality of primary, secondary, and vocational schools across Indonesia? We have over 300,000. But 88.8% of these 320,000 are below minimum standards. We have some 4,700 universities, but only 96 of them are reputable. So our quality is so or below minimum level. So what should we do then? Here, as I share to you, that 7 issue is extremely important to be addressed by all of us at this conference. One is that to set up and to keep the standards. So, second is to improve our assessment, to achieve the standards. And the third is to increase the accountability in managing our education. And the fourth is the visibility of our school, 320,000 schools across Indonesia, and also our campuses. and teachers, lecturers, and leadership in our university, in our school has to be improved. And also partnership with community and also managing appropriate finance. So that's good to compare with the OECD, with the four type of objective of their education, and hopefully ASEAN, Indonesia will also adopt this one. The personal aspect, social aspect, societal aspect, and the third, human dignity aspects. And this is also from UNICEF, that is extremely important for Indonesia to address this need. First, ICT and digital skills. It's very vital for all of us. Secondly is foreign languages. Yeah? This is the second issue recommended by UNICEF for Indonesian education. Third is communication skills. Fourth is interpersonal skill and creativity. So Indonesia have a very serious problem on these 4 areas or 5 areas. The next one is, this is new also framework from, where this one I got? Oh yeah, Puspendik Framework Assessment 2017 for 21st century skill, reading, writing, and numeracy. Yeah, and wrote one day that the quality of literacy in Papua in primaries, in secondary school, lower secondary school, anak-anak SMP, 50% meskipun sudah kelas 3 belum bisa membaca. Anak-anak di Papua 40% di SMA belum bisa membaca, menulis. Ini anak di SMA. Kenapa kita diam melihat saudara-saudara kita di sana seperti itu? So this is recommendation made by Puspendik, life skill, media skill. And this another suggestion from World Economic Forum, Davos, 2020, 2016. So provide complex problem solving skill to our students. Develop their creativity, develop their critical thinking, and also management aspect, people management, and how to coordinate with others, emotional intelligence, judgment and decision making, and service orientation, negotiation, and cognitive flexibility. According to World Economic Forum, we are very weak on this 905, 907. How many aspects? 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, 10 aspects recommended by World Economic Forum for Indonesia. This is the very last one. I think we need to keep this. This is also a reflection that we need to take the benefit of the past experience we have had during Budi Utomo time in 1908. It's a great remark that has been made by this generation, that education should be lifelong learning, improve basic life skill on agriculture, trade, and also skill on home industry, and also revitalizing the culture of indigenous people, and also to uplift humanity. Those are very monumental that has been made by the generasi Budi Utomo. This is the very last. Ini Bapak Ibu, ini tembok Berlin sebelum rubuh. Saya mengambil gambarnya. Ya. Coba dilihat di gambar ini, Bapak Ibu bisa lihat. Di situ di bagian Jerman Barat ada apa sih namanya itu, Aldi, itu gudang makanan, ya. Jadi kayak Bulog gitu. Situ ada ayam daging melimpah gitu, ada kemewahan ini, ada mobil, ada segala macam. Tapi di Jerman Timur coba lihat kelaparan, ada kematian massal gitu ya. Dan meskipun sudah sekian dekade menyatu dari Jerman Barat, Jerman Timur, tapi Jerman Barat selalu juga membantu Jerman Timur karena kemiskinan. Sama juga Korea Utara, Korea Selatan. Korea Utara sangat miskin, banyak mati kelaparan. Tapi Korea Selatan maju luar biasa. Mengapa? Karena di situ ada keadilan, pendidikannya bagus. Jadi kalau bangsa ini kita mau selamatkan, saya kira kita perlu memetik hikmah dari rubuhnya tembok Berlin. Jadi kita jangan menggandaikan kedaulatan negara ini kepada bangsa manapun. Dulu kita miskin di zaman Bung Karno, tapi kita tidak mengundang bangsa lain menguasai kekayaan kita. Kalau ini kita terus lakukan, kita akan mewarisi generasi akan datang negara yang tidak punya lagi apa-apa. Mudah-mudahan kita bisa selamat dengan teman-teman Bapak Ibu yang hadir di sini untuk melihat realitas ini secara nyata, dan mudah-mudahan universitas itu bisa menjadi otaknya negara dan tetap harus menyuarakan suara intelektualnya untuk kebesaran negeri ini, hari ini dan hari esok. So thanks so much for your kind attention to these three aspects that I have shared to you. First is the reality of Indonesia. The second is the implication of those realities. There are three implications: mass poverty, inequality, and potential for disintegration. And the last is that let's take a new roadmap to compare the comparable and to make a great reflection and to combine the two. Kita belajar dari negara-negara lain yang selamat dan kita juga memetik keunggulan-keunggulan kita di masa lampau dan kita gabungkan dua hal ini untuk jalan terbaik untuk keselamatan bersama kini dan ke depan. So thank you so much, Nara.
Thank you so much, Prof. Hafid. Please give big applause for the amazing presentation. Maybe before we start the question and answer, one thing that I want to ask, Prof, it's about awareness, kepedulian. Sometimes we don't really aware that we have a problem actually as the people outside of the academician. How to make the people aware about this injustice situation, especially through education, as we all know that the poor is powerless.
Well, thanks so much, Nara. It's a very insightful question. Yeah. Well, there is no shortcut, you see. But the most important thing is that we have to realize that we have danger in front of us. This is the reality, cannot be debated because everyone can observe it. For instance, the distribution of resources. What is the reason so far you gave 9 million, 50 million square hectares of land to others? Why not empowering the powerless? I have here data, you see, Nara, may I share to you that? You see, look here. This is very risky because 98% or 90% of local perda, local act, itu hanya untuk meningkatkan pendapatan asli daerah. Jadi orang miskin tetap diperas pajak terus. 8% itu we call it pemutihan aset. Jadi pejabat bisa ambil rumah dinas, bisa beli mobil dinas, dibeli kembali, itu pemutihan aset. Hanya 2-3% hanya untuk orang miskin. Itu kebijakan di seluruh perda, seluruh daerah. So that's not wise. Negara kita itu menganut paham Pancasila. Negara kita kerakyatan yang dipimpin oleh hikmah, kebijaksanaan, bukan kebijakan. Kebijakan itu keputusan yang tidak didasari oleh kearifan gitu ya. Kenapa semua kekayaan negara diberikan ke kelompok ini gitu. So the solution is probably we need to adopt Mandela's way to remove the social gap. There are two ways South Africa has done in the past. First, they immediately adopted, they call it the law of BBE, broad-based black economic empowerment. Jadi ekonomi di seluruh Afrika Selatan yang ditinggalkan oleh rezim apartheid, kulit putih, yang mengusir seluruh kekayaan negara itu, sehingga kulit hitam itu hanya jadi penonton. Mandela berkuasa, dia buat itu undang-undang memprioritaskan kulit hitam dengan basis yang masif, yang luas supaya terbebas dari kemiskinan. So that the first, Mandela did this. The second was Mandela adopted, they call it the law of equality. Undang-undang pemerataan. Bukan kita memburu pertumbuhan, tetapi pemerataan, so growth through equity. Bisa kita tumbuh, tapi jangan yang tumbuh hanya 4 orang. Masa ada 4 orang warga negara Indonesia, kekayaannya setengah kekayaan seluruh penduduk Indonesia. Itu di mana Pancasila kita. Kenapa kampus itu membisu melihat realitas ini? Kenapa misalnya Pulau Rempang dan pulau lain itu digusur? Apa dasarnya? Dikasih ke Cina, ada Sinci perusahaan. Dia mau investasi sekian ratus triliun, tapi ini ternyata cash flow-nya hanya 4,8 juta dolar. Perusahaan miskin. So that's the reality. So education should respond this inequality. Mudah-mudahan kita selamat. Yeah.
Thank you so much for the insightful answer. Okay, so now we have question and answer session. We will have 2 questions. So please, yeah, okay. The first one, please, Miss Ami. Yes.
Hello, Professor, and it is really interesting and critical issue you raise here, and I do really agree about the inequality here back to Indonesia in many aspects, I can say, and we can say education, gender, and about the community, so many. And I would like to know, because somehow we are in between the government and also our citizen. We are as academia here. What can we do in real? Because some of the solution mostly come up with the government, but the policy things, as you said, we need to be concerned. Yes, we concerned. We need to be aware. Yes, we aware with that. But with that part, as academics, or what we can do within the university educational practices to raise this. Because, for example, we also implement this in our class. For example, we have kelas wawasan pendidikan, landasan pendidikan. We do the analysis of the policy, for example, and then what next from that? It's all become like big question mark, because somehow some critical students have that point also in their mind, but ended up like, oh, okay, maybe, for example, demonstration is part of the solution for them, to do some movement, but we would like to more educational way, if we can say that. But what kind of a real action do you suggest us as, like, okay, we do teaching, and then we build this critical thinking, and also, okay, we do the research related to the inequality, and then build some concept with that. But other than that, I think those citizens that feel this is unfair for them, wait kind of like the real action that give them the real impact. Okay, we feel like they put attention to us to like, I think, save the nation in the future for that. For example, I don't want to put example too far away from Jakarta, but we can say the Seribu Island. It's really different. That's still part of Jakarta. But how the life of people there is really different. Even like for early childhood institution, how many of them they have? The teacher, if we ask about like, do you know this kind of like professional development program? No, we don't really have those kind of news around here. But that's what's happening in the field. And we really consider about the situation. But do you have like, okay, this is a big homework, but we have some alternative that we can do in real to at least show our attention for them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Miss Ami.
Boleh, terus saja.
Okay.
Please.
Thank you very much. I will try with my English. Okay. My name is Henny Siswantari. I'm from Ahmad Dahlan University, Yogyakarta. Yes. Nice to meet you, Prof. Hamid. Yes. Okay. In recent times, there have been many cases of student to college student committing suicide because they feel depressed. Yes. And how do we as educators solve mental health problem, which are currently a very urgent issue to be resolved? Yes. How will they solve social problem if they are not finished with themselves? Yes, and what kind of education can we develop, yes, to restore a high spirit of life in students to benefit their environment or others? Second question is, I'm a art teacher, yes, at PGSD. So how do we, how traditional art, yes, in education, because maybe I can speak bahasa, kita ketahui bahwa anak-anak zaman sekarang tidak mengetahui kebudayaannya. This is very emotional for me because sangat banyak kebudayaan ada yang di wilayah di Indonesia itu tidak diketahui oleh anak-anak sendiri. Bagaimana kemudian cita-cita Budi Utomo yang tadi disampaikan oleh Prof. Hamid bahwa seni tradisi harus kembali digaungkan. Gitu. Sementara di lingkungan kita, bahkan mungkin anak-anak kita pun tidak mengerti tradisi yang ada di wilayahnya, bahkan bahasa daerah pun untuk kami yang ada di wilayah Jawa, mereka sudah tidak mengetahui. Itu saja, terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you so much, Bu Henny.
Bu Henny, great.
Okay. Dua dulu, silakan Prof.
Well, thanks so much, Ami. It's a very insightful question that you have made. So you're eligible to be next Indonesian president, Ami. So sweet reflection. Yeah, thanks so much. So there are two, I think. One is, well, it's important to make our university as a brain of the nation, as the brain of the nation. University should be a real scientific community, very independent one, yes. Should be a center of excellence to voice the voiceless, to empower the powerless, to remove poverty, to remove authoritarian, to remove injustices. So I served Ministry of Justice for over a decade. But maybe, I mean, you can call the Ministry of Injustice. Huh? Justice is the spirit of the nations. If no justice means that the nation will automatically decay from the within. Dia hancur dari dalam kalau ketidakadilan itu tidak ada. Masa orang di Pulau Rempang digusur hanya untuk menyenangkan Cina? Kan tidak masuk di akal. So danger. Kapan Ami mau digusur? Jangan, kamu harus memberitahu bahwa saya tidak boleh digusur. Saya digusur Harus ada undang-undang yang membenarkan. Kalau saya digusur harus dipindahkan ke tempat yang lebih baik. Kalau mau digusur harus ada kesepakatan. Dan kalau digusur, panduan PBB, penggusuran itu dilakukan, tidak boleh ada simbol-simbol kekuasaan. Tidak boleh pakai pentungan, tidak boleh pakai seragam PNS atau pakaian tentara. Karena kita tidak perang, yang kita hadapin orang miskin. Nelayan di Pulau Rempang itu bukan orang kaya raya, tidak punya lapangan golf. Rumahnya itu di pinggir sungai, gubuk. Kenapa dibawakan senjata laras panjang? Dibawakan pentungan, dibawakan water cannon, tear gas, disiram dengan gas air mata. Tidak boleh menggusur kalau anak ujian, karena terganggu nanti. Itu panduan PBB. Ini digusur, dipertontonkan di sekolah, siswa ada 10 kena, dibawa ke rumah sakit. Gurunya juga kena. Ini hanya terjadi perlakuan seperti ini di negara totalitarian yang berhaluan politik komunis. Cina membantai lebih 1 juta umat Islam di Uighur. Itu ciri negara komunis. Kita bukan negara komunis. Negara berhaluan Pancasila. So you say that. Kampus berhaluan politik Pancasila. Bukan berhaluan politik komunis. Remember that. So you have to be the brain of the nation. That's the first. The second is technically the academic community should use their scientific community, their scientific capacity to make analysis what the most appropriate policy to be adopted to remove those gaps. Itu yang dilakukan Mandela. Kampus dengan kebijakan baru, pemerataan dan memberdayakan penduduk kulit hitam, yang melakukan itu kampus. Harus lakukan ini, lakukan ini. Jadi ada action plan. Jangan dimusuhi kampus, karena dia lembaga independen. Dia harus jadi otaknya negara. Itu kemarin yang saya lakukan, berkunjung ke universitas-universitas di Timur Tengah. Kenapa dia diam melihat perang terjadi setiap saat, padahal dia lembaga yang baik. Jadi mungkin kita universitas ini terlalu sabar ya. Mungkin hanya dipikirkan dirinya, itu bukan memikirkan bangsanya. So the second is, why don't we adopt, this the third Yunus strategy in Bangladesh, in Dhaka. I visited Bangladesh a few times. And it's a great breakthrough made by Yunus. He got Nobels because he removed poverty with education. He empowered women powerless with great interventions. So why don't we replicate this in our education system? So let's fight, Ami, before being whatever you want to do, Ami. I think, well, you have to achieve your dream. Well, but Annie, yes, why don't we replicate the Finland education system? Finland is the most or the happiest student in the world, or the happiest nation in the world. Negara paling bahagia di dunia. It has been 7 years consecutively, 7 tahun berturut-turut, tercatat negara paling bahagia di dunia. Negara paling sengsara itu adalah Afghanistan, Sudan. Indonesia negara pada urutan ke-80 sekian. Jadi 60% penduduknya susah, tidak bahagia. Hanya 30 sekian persen yang bahagia. Mungkin di ruangan ini yang paling bahagia lah. Jadi ini negara bukan negara bahagia. Kecuali di UPI ya, paling bahagia. Jadi paling bahagia. Bagaimana mau bahagia, gajinya hanya cukup untuk pegawai negeri itu ya, cukup untuk tidak mati gitu ya kan. Jadi menyedihkan memang gitu ya. Dan pejabat-pejabat, kalau dia misalnya bupati, dia tidak korupsi, atau gubernur tidak korupsi, karena kos politik untuk bupati bisa 100 miliar. Itu dia harus bekerja sebanyak 182 tahun baru modalnya kembali. Kalau gajinya secara resmi, gimana mungkin tidak mencuri? Itu logika yang gampang. Jadi begitu dia duduk di kekuasaan, yang dia urus bukan rakyat. Peraturan daerah itu 90% sekian, itu hanya untuk meningkatkan pendapatan daerah. 5% pemutihan aset, hanya sekian persen yang untuk orang miskin. Ikuti Finlandia, ada 5 cara mengelola pendidikan sehingga membahagiakan. Dan saya kira tetap kampus itu memberi kebahagiaan karena dia memberi ilmu. Dan ilmu adalah alat untuk merubah masa depan anak, merubah dirinya sendiri, dan merubah bangsanya. Kampus harus hadir pada perubahan-perubahan besar itu supaya kita selamat. Jangan kita membisu ya. Baik, terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Baik, thank you so much, Prof. There is one last question, Prof, in our chat Zoom. Dari Bapak atau Ibu Maimun nih, dari Universitas Syah Kuala. Jadi dalam beberapa tulisan, beberapa negara yang berhasil mengembangkan karakter positif pada siswa usia sekolah, seperti Jepang dan Finlandia mengedepankan pengembangan karakter sehingga anak-anak usia sekolah dasar dan menengah di beberapa negara tersebut bisa tumbuh dengan kebiasaan peduli terhadap sesama lingkungan untuk kebaikan orang lain. Seperti membuang sampah, membantu orang lain dan sebagainya. Ada apa dengan negara kita ya Prof? Padahal bukankah kita sudah ada program revolusi mental? That's the question.
Okay, well, that's a great question. From Shakwala, yeah, I mean. Well, I visited Japan probably 30, 40 times. I studied in Japan when I was still 21 years of age, when I was still in first year in State University of Makassar. So that's a unique in Japan, for instance, building characters. It is so extremely important for Indonesia to be adopted. Jepang itu, Bapak Ibu, punya rasa malu. Yang dijunjung tinggi itu etika. Menteri luar negerinya namanya Mehera. Masih muda, dia lulusan Harvard. Dia sebenarnya calon Perdana Menteri. Tapi dia terima donasi politik dari tetangganya. 50.000 yen kalau dikali rupiah itu hanya 5,6 juta. Dia terima. Tapi akhirnya dia expose oleh media bahwa Menteri Luar Negeri Jepang ini menerima bantuan 50.000 yen dari orang yang belum warga negara Jepang, masih warga negara Korea. Padahal undang-undang Jepang nggak boleh menerima bantuan dari negara lain. Padahal Maira tidak tahu, karena sudah lebih 25 tahun bertetangga. Tapi di Jepang itu, suku Ainu yang tinggal di Pulau Hokkaido itu sudah 2000 tahun tinggal di sana. Baru diakui 2005 sebagai warga negara Jepang. Kalau kita di sini siapapun dikasih KTP ya gampang jadi warga negara sini. Di Jepang dia pelihara identitas bangsanya. Nah ternyata orang Korea ini belum jadi warga negara Jepang. Mahera malu mengundurkan diri. Hanya 5,6 juta. Menteri dalam negerinya yang diangkat menjadi juga kepala staf kantor Perdana Menteri, jadi seperti perannya Pak Muldoko. Diajak oleh seorang pengusaha makan malam di satu restoran mewah. Ada yang mengkritik bahwa orang yang mengundangnya itu punya kepentingan untuk satu kepentingan bisnis. Besoknya Menteri Dalam Negeri ini mengundurkan diri. Kita di sini bergandengan kemana-mana itu pengusaha-pengusaha. Kita datangi itu, kamu mau kasih komisi saya berapa? Tidak ada etika kita. Gitu. So ethics is very fundamental. Rasa malu gitu. Di Jepang, misalnya di depan rumah saya ada jalan 5 meter. Di situ tertulis tidak boleh nyebrang ke situ. Kalau mau nyebrang mutar 10 kilo ke sana. Tidak ada orang Jepang mau langgar itu. Dia harus jalan, meskipun tengah malam. Itu Jepang. Sini enggak. Gusur ambil pulau ini kasih ke orang lain, enggak peduli. Tidak ada etika. Masa kita lebih pentingkan ini etnis Melayu digusur, lalu datang dengan ganti etnis Cina? No, you cannot do that. Itu kebiadaban dari segi aspek HAM. Itu saya tulis itu. Jadi etika kita itu menjunjung tinggi Pancasila. Ya. Pancasila itu jadi acuan kita. Sekarang kita tidak pakai Pancasila. Mana keadilan sosial bagi seluruh rakyat Indonesia? Kita jadi sebuah bangsa melindungi segenap bangsa Indonesia. Bukan melindungi segenap bangsa lain. Kenapa kasih 4.000 pulau? Ini pelanggaran dari segala pelanggaran. So I think character, especially in Aceh, you're very, you see culturally respected. Dengan kanunnya segala macam itu harus menjadi pedoman kita untuk memajukan anak-anak kita dimanapun ya. Tapi ingat di Undang-Undang Dasar itu sepanjang sesuai dengan perkembangan nilai-nilai modern. Maksudnya sepanjang nilai-nilai itu masih dianut. Misalnya saja di Papua, kalau pakai koteka kan jangan dipertahankan karena tidak sesuai dengan nilai-nilai modern. Ada orang kalau misalnya tetangganya sakit atau berpulang gitu ya, tetangganya itu mengikat jari tangannya dengan benang gitu setelah 2-3 hari ya, biru, lalu jari tangannya itu dipotong lalu diantar ke orang yang berduka tadi. Kebudayaan seperti ini tidak bisa dipertahankan. Harus pendidikan hadir untuk memberi nilai-nilai modern supaya keluar dari keterbelakangan itu. Gimana orang bisa bekerja kalau jari tangannya habis? Itu teman-teman bisa lihat itu suku Dani di Papua. Itulah dalam cita-cita kita menjadi sebuah bangsa, mencerdaskan kehidupan bangsa. Kampus itu harus menjadi cahaya dari pencerdasan kehidupan bangsa. Pencerdasan kehidupan bangsa itu artinya kebiasaan-kebiasaan kita, misalnya kebiasaan kita membisu terhadap kebiadaban, itu kehidupan yang tidak cerdas. Kebiasaan kita menyanyiakan waktu, tidak kita produktif, melayani kebaikan di profesi kita. Itu kehidupan yang tidak cerdas. Sama juga dengan pola hidup yang konsumtif misalnya. Kenapa tidak belikan buku anak misalnya? Kehidupan yang cerdas itu kehidupan yang memberi makna yang luar biasa pada setiap detik kehidupannya. Itu indah. Tujuan kita menjadi sebuah bangsa. Jadi bukan ilmu semata-mata, tapi the intellectualizing the life of the nations. Ya mudah-mudahan itu menjadi solusi bagi kebesaran bangsa kita, bangsa raksasa, bangsa 2 kali lebih besar dari Uni Eropa, tapi tiba-tiba lapuk dari dalam karena pengelolaan negara yang tidak Pancasilais.
Thank you so much. Kampus sebagai cahaya bangsa, harus menjadi sebagai cahaya bangsa. That's really deep and also thoughtful. Thank you so much Prof. Hafid Abbas. Sekali lagi tepuk tangan untuk Prof. Hafid Abbas. Okay, before I end this session, I would like to make a conclusion for this discussion. So, there is a lot that we need to improve in our education. Okay. There is a lot that we need to improve in our education, especially to reduce the gap between the rich and the underprivileged. Our homework is not easy. We need to open the eyes of all our people that we need to unite as one, as the big nation to achieve Indonesia Emas 2045. And also as the academician, we should be the brain of the nation, should be use the scientific capacity to make a policy to remove those social gap and also remove poverty through education. That's all. Thank you so much. That's from me. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you so much for Professor Hafid Abbas for your knowledge and information. And also thank you so much for Mr. Nararia Hutama Putra for leading us for this discussion today. And the next is we have a coaching clinic by Mr. Firman. Will come by Zoom, Mr. Firman?
Yes, can you hear me?
Okay, the time is yours, Mr. Firman. Ya, welcome Bapak Dr. Firmanul Catur Wibowo. The time is yours to this section about coaching clinic.
Okay, thank you very much, the moderator. In yours, I want to explain to you the discuss with me coaching clinic, and then the section bilingual for Indonesia language and English. I'm sorry to come late in this meeting because I want to finish the visitation accreditation international for Germany, she in, and then we would like to discuss in the meeting Zoom the theme of the publication, the coaching clinic of. Okay, you can see my slide. Mr. Uswatan, can you see my slide? Okay, Miss Moderator.
Yes, Mr. Firman, we can see your slide.
Okay, all participants in Icelet, the section, the topic is coaching clinic article, disampaikan dalam International Conference Environmental Learning, Education, Technology Icelet, in yours, yeah, the Faculty of Education and BKSPTN Barat. My name is Firmanul Catur Wibowo. I come from Department of Master Physics Education, Universitas Negeri Jakarta. The honorable all participant and committee, I want to explain to you, tak kenal maka tak sayang. In this morning, my name is Firmanul Catur Wibowo. I'm sorry to tidak ada maksud untuk pamer. Jadi ingin menceritakan seperti apa perjalanan hidup kami sampai hari ini menjadi dosen, Bapak Ibu. Saya S1 dari Universitas Negeri Semarang, S2 di UPI Bandung, S3 UPI, short course di Turki di Yildiz Technical University, Bapak Ibu. Alhamdulillah 3 tahun terakhir dapat hibah dari Dikti, dan tahun 2022 didanai 2003 ada 3 hibah Dikti sebagai ketua dan riset keilmuan LPDP. Alhamdulillah hari ini ada 80 artikel di profil kami, aktivitas belajar, bekerja, dan berbagi. Mohon izin Bapak Ibu semua peserta Icelet, terima kasih sudah diundang untuk berbagi pada forum yang berbahagia pada siang hari ini. Okay, and then this is my unyu picture. Okay, saat ini saya kerja di UNC di pendidikan fisika. Mari kita bersaing jadikan karya ilmiah sedekat sahabat Bapak Ibu. Jadi, okay. Nah, alhamdulillah terakhir PhD program in UPI, short course ke Turki, kami selesaikan dalam waktu 2 tahun 7 bulan dari beasiswa unggulan calon dosen. Ilmu dan iman sedekat sahabat. And this book, right? Silakan Bapak Ibu bisa buka Google Scholar saya untuk melihat bukunya. Bagi yang mau download gratis bisa chat ke email atau ke WA. Nanti saya kasih tautan buku gratisnya Bapak Ibu. Oke, Bapak Ibu, tadi di coaching klinik ini apa? Coaching klinik itu hari ini Bapak Ibu bisa mengecek seseorang lewat publikasinya. Candaannya di kampus serius, kalau dosen fokus mengajar, mana publikasinya. Kalau dosen, mohon maaf terbalik, kalau dosen fokus meneliti, mana publikasinya. Kalau dosen fokus mengajar, mana buku ajarnya. Mari kita tanya diri kita masing-masing, dan mari kita senantiasa mengimprove diri kita untuk menjadi yang terbaik. Alhamdulillah hari ini di UNJ, saya ranking 3 publikasi internasional. Nah, thank you very much all committee, Prof. Arita, Pak Dimas, and Bu Uswatun, the acara, and another committee, the Icelet. Congratulations, selamat karena Icelet sudah kontrak dengan publisher Atlantis Press, terindeks Google Scholar dan akan terindeks WOS. Bapak Ibu, the outline of the coaching clinic in this morning, introduction, publication, indication scopus, writing manuscript, proceeding AIP Conference ataupun Atlantis Press and Conclusion. Bapak Ibu, mari kita ikatlah ilmu dengan menuliskannya. Mohon izin moderator, saya dikasih waktu berapa menit? Halo, can you hear me? Miss
Yes,
Moderator?
Pak, you have 30 minutes for
30 minutes.
explanation, yes.
Okay, 30 minutes. Okay, 30 minutes. Jadi pentingnya publikasi, Bapak Ibu. Jadi di sini tagihan apapun penelitiannya, baik universitas maupun nasional atau fakultas, tetaplah publikasi, Bapak Ibu. Nah, kenapa kita perlu menulis artikel ilmiah? Karena hasil penelitian kita pada jurnal ilmiah terinternasional. Kenapa tidak menulis di jurnal ilmiah NASA saja? All participants, the purpose of the writing the paper, science, the sciences, social science, engineering, and sciences. The purpose of the dissemination to knowledge, and then the purpose the paper, scientific paper, to communicate the community, and then the contribute from the new knowledge or excellent knowledge. Jadi Bapak Ibu, kita menulis publikasi itu untuk mengkomunikasikan pada komunitas. Jadi makanya teman-teman VIP dan BKSPTN Barat ini membuat seminar. Tujuannya apa? Hasil penelitian Bapak Ibu diceritakan di forum ini, dikasih saran, terus diperbaiki, terus disubmit ke proceeding reputasi. Nah, Bapak Ibu, selain itu, tujuan kita menulis artikel ilmiah ini adalah untuk kemajuan pengetahuan. And then ini peraturan yang lama Bapak Ibu untuk pengajuan akademik pedoman angka kredit tahun 2024 belum keluar, jadi syarat wajibnya seperti sama Bapak Ibu. Kalau mau kolektor kepala harus Sinta 2 atau di atasnya. Kalau mau guru besar itu harus internasional bereputasi. Kenapa bereputasi? Nanti saya ceritakan. Alhamdulillah hari ini saya bagian dari BKI, Bantuan Konferensi Ilmiah Internasional di Dikti. Di sana untuk membantu konferensi yang dilaksanakan oleh di Indonesia, karena itu bersumber dari APBN, BUPTN, Bapak Ibu semua kampus negeri bisa mengakses. Nah Bapak Ibu, lulusan magister atau doktor itu wajib publikasi Bapak Ibu, makanya pentingnya international conference ataupun menulis artikel itu sangat mutlak diperlukan, karena kaitannya mohon izin di kampus Bapak Ibu pasti ada istilah IQ, indikator kinerja universitas, IQ 5 Bapak Ibu. Jadi silakan Bapak Ibu untuk mereview sejenak sejauh mana kita berkontribusi terhadap IQ. Nah, kalau kita melihat di jurnal Sinta, ada di sini Bapak Ibu Sinta untuk jurnal nasional accreditation. Nah, ini kaitannya kenapa kita harus buat Sinta Bapak Ibu. Waktu saya jadi Korwil, koordinator wilayah Sinta, tahun 2019 sampai 2020 Bapak Ibu, itu Sinta ini diprotes sama DPR dan seluruh masyarakat Indonesia. Kenapa kita selalu berpatokan pada Scopus itu Bapak Ibu. Nanti saya ceritakan kenapa Scopus itu dianggap bereputasi. Nah karena kenapa kita nggak buat indexing sendiri. Nah dari situlah kenapa kita tidak membuat indexing sendiri. Makanya buatlah indexing sendiri namanya Sinta. Untuk kenapa namanya Sinta? Ini policy Bapak Ibu, kebijakan, regulasi dari pemerintah, nama. Nah Bapak Ibu bisa sudah familiar dengan Sinta ini. Selanjutnya ada istilah Scopus Bapak Ibu. Scopus ini database terbaik Bapak Ibu. Nah Bapak Ibu, kenapa Scopus dianggap database terbaik? Karena jawabannya satu Bapak Ibu. Jika Bapak Ibu punya user Scopus Bapak Ibu ya. Nah seperti ini Bapak Ibu. Kita bisa melihat semuanya Bapak Ibu. Misalkan saya ingin mencari artikel Bapak Ibu. Nah, di sini Bapak Ibu, ini kita tinggal mensortir Bapak Ibu. Jadi di tahun bidang kita, ya kita mau misalkan bidang Q1 ya Bapak Ibu, yang bentuknya jurnal, tinggal kita sortir Bapak Ibu. Nah, database seperti inilah yang hanya dimiliki oleh Scopus Bapak Ibu. Nah, terus saya mau pilih bidang scope education misalnya. Nah, juga bisa Bapak Ibu. Nah, karena database terbaik inilah yang dimiliki oleh Scopus dan bisa memeringkatkan setiap kampus, maka di Scopus ini dianggap bereputasi karena negara nggak boleh menyebut merek Bapak Ibu. Makanya disebut ini nyebutnya adalah reputasi. Kalau Scopus itu produk. Apa kaitannya dengan Elsevier? Elsevier perusahaannya Bapak Ibu. Nah, terus apa kaitannya dengan SJR? SJR itu adalah rumahnya Scientific Journal Ranking Bapak Ibu. Nah, ini contoh misalkan afiliasi di UNJ, ada berapa dokumen. Nah, ini sama halnya yang jadi verifikator Sinta pasti bisa ngecek data ini Bapak Ibu. Nah, kalau Sinta bisa seperti ini tapi mengembed data dari sana kesusahan Bapak Ibu. Tapi Scopus ini orang yang punya API bisa mendownloadnya Bapak Ibu. Nah, ini contohnya Bapak Ibu. Jadi kenapa Scopus dianggap bereputasi? Karena belum ada yang lebih baik dari Scopus Bapak Ibu. Karena kalau Bapak Ibu buka WOS di Clarivate, itu sama datanya tidak selengkap Scopus. Nah, jawabannya di situ Bapak Ibu. Kita lanjutkan Bapak Ibu. Nah, selanjutnya ini kan coaching klinik ya Bapak Ibu. Nah, sebelum saya menceritakan seperti apa menulis dalam waktu sesingkat-singkatnya dan secepat-cepatnya, di sini Bapak Ibu, kalau kita ingin, ini SJR ya Bapak Ibu ya, SJR, Scientific Journal Ranking Bapak Ibu. Itu dia melihat 4 hal Bapak Ibu. Pertama, jurnal, terus book series, conference proceeding, and trend. Nah, jadi Scopus sama SJR itu temenan Bapak Ibu, satu produk. Jadi kalau Bapak Ibu buka di bawah, itu ada tulisannya Bapak Ibu. Powered by Scopus. Mohon izin saya share screen Bapak Ibu, pindah ke. Nah, jadi Bapak Ibu jika membuka di SJR nih ya Bapak Ibu ya, ini SJR. Kalau Bapak Ibu buka SJR, terus bawahnya ada tulisannya nih Bapak Ibu. Nih, powered by Scopus. Nah, jadi dia diberdayakan oleh Scopus. Berarti Scopus sama SJR itu berteman Bapak Ibu, satu produk miliknya Elsevier Bapak Ibu. Nah, jadi Bapak Ibu kalau ingin mencari jurnal ya di Scopus ini, kalau saya ngecek atas bawah istilahnya, jadi di sini jurnalnya masih discontinue atau enggak gitu. Nah, Bapak Ibu bisa cek di sini. Oke Bapak Ibu, saya lanjutkan. Nah, nanti di PPT saya sudah mendownloadkan Bapak Ibu dari database Scopus yang Q1 bidang pendidikan. Nanti Bapak Ibu bisa buka drive ini dan nanti bisa download jurnal-jurnal mana Bapak Ibu di bidang pendidikan. Jadi supaya mempersingkat waktu, saya nanti kasih PPT-nya Bapak Ibu. Selanjutnya Bapak Ibu, nah Bapak Ibu di sini, jadi Bapak Ibu jangan sampai apa ya ngecek continue sama enggak di mana. Oh di SJR nggak ada. Tidak ada tulisannya continuous hanya sampai tahun 2022. Nah, saya nyebutnya check up 2002 atau 4 Bapak Ibu. Pertama di SJR tadi, yang kedua di Scopus Bapak Ibu. Nah, kalau ada di dua itu dan di sini masih tertulis present Bapak Ibu di coverage-nya ini. Nah, masih present artinya itu masih bisa diterima. Nah, kalau di sini ada tulisannya discontinue, berarti jangan ambil itu Bapak Ibu. Nah, kemarin beberapa hari yang lalu lagi rame di UNC, ada yang jurnal IJ sama PGOGE Bapak Ibu. Nah, itu sudah discontinue. Jadi ya itu namanya kenapa discontinue Bapak Ibu? Karena dia salah satu penyebabnya volume artikel, jumlah artikel yang terbit tiap volumenya tidak sama Bapak Ibu. Oke, Bapak Ibu, saya lanjutkan. Nah, terus Bapak Ibu cek di predatory journal, di list, masuk predatory journal nggak? Nah, jadi kalau masuk predatory journal ini harus dihindari Bapak Ibu, apalagi Bapak Ibu yang tujuannya untuk menuju grup besar Bapak Ibu. Nah, biasanya yang baru terindeks Scopus kemungkinan kecil masuk Bapak Ibu. Jadi Bapak Ibu silakan bisa cek di list untuk itu. Nah, sesi yang kedua Bapak Ibu, karena hanya 30 menit Bapak Ibu, nanti tadi dapat info seandainya ada waktu bisa coaching klinik langsung gimana menulis artikel Bapak Ibu. Nah, Bapak Ibu, di dalam menulis artikel ilmiah ini, jika kita telah memperoleh sesuatu yang penting berupa ide-ide baru, fakta-fakta baru, atau tinjauan cerdas terhadap fakta lama, Bapak Ibu bisa, nah, oke. Jadi tinjauan-tinjauan ini Bapak Ibu bisa lakukan. Nah, setelah kita dapat ide baru, fakta baru, terus tinjauan cerdas dari ide dan fakta lama, maka diungkapkan dengan jelas pernyataan masalah, solusi, dan kontribusi terhadap disiplin ilmu. Nah, maksudnya gimana, Pak? Jadi Bapak Ibu kalau ditanya, saya payung penelitian atau saya punya ide penelitian ini, dicek di Google Scholar. Nah, tren tidak. Nah, cara ngeceknya di 5 tahun terakhir, Bapak Ibu. Nah, selanjutnya Bapak Ibu, setelah kita sudah mengetahui posisi ide kita, baru kita mengeceknya Bapak Ibu. Tuliskan, nah ini saran saya Bapak Ibu, tuliskan artikel standar Q1 dan publikasikan. Jadi kita cari artikel induk dulu Bapak Ibu, yang mirip dengan riset kita, yang akan kita lakukan di tahun ini atau tahun depan, cari di Google Scholar. Misalkan trend in management education itu apa? Apakah kaitannya dengan IT ataukah dengan kaitannya hands on gitu Bapak Ibu. Nah, ini yang perlu Bapak Ibu lakukan. Nah, ada lima jenis artikel ilmiah Bapak Ibu. Yang pertama terobosan, yaitu memecahkan masalah terbuka yang telah dicoba selesaikan oleh banyak sekali peneliti. Nah, ini jarang sekali dilakukan Bapak Ibu terkait artikel terobosan. Sedangkan artikel rintisan atau groundbreaking itu membuka lapangan baru yang belum digali oleh orang lain. Terus artikel penemuan atau inovasi cerdas yang menarik. Loh kok saya harus nulis di artikel mana Pak? Sabar Bapak Ibu. Nah, kita menulis di artikel kemajuan atau progres. Artikel progres ini memecahkan masalah terbuka yang timbul dari pekerjaan atau artikel sebelumnya Bapak Ibu. Jadi masalah sebelumnya apa? Nah, Bapak Ibu ketika mencari artikel induk di Q1 misalkan sesuai bidang Bapak Ibu, cari Google Scholar atau jurnal masing-masing, jurnal sesuai bidang kita, Bapak Ibu, triknya itu kumpulkan jurnal-jurnal sesuai bidang. Lalu trennya apa? Nah, biasanya di terakhir di conclusion atau kesimpulan itu ada tulisannya Bapak Ibu. Apa sarannya? Nah, Bapak Ibu sempurnakan dari kekurangan itu. Itulah yang disebut dengan penelitian kemajuan atau memecahkan masalah terbuka yang timbul dari pekerjaan artikel sebelumnya. Nah, kalau artikel review itu menyatukan pekerjaan-pekerjaan trivia dalam subjek tertentu, berisi nilai tambah berupa kerangka dan taksonomi. Gimana contohnya, Pak? Nah, nanti saya contohkan, Bapak Ibu. Nah, ini contoh artikel terobosan, Bapak Ibu. Oke, sekilas saja. Ini contoh artikel rintisan, Bapak Ibu. Rintisan itu artinya dia membuka ide-ide baru, Bapak Ibu. Ini contoh artikel kemajuan, Bapak Ibu. Oke, terus ini contoh artikel tinjauan atau review, Bapak Ibu. Nah, terus ini proses publikasi ilmiah, Bapak Ibu. Jadi pertama masalah, Bapak Ibu. Hidup ini sudah banyak masalah, Pak. Entah masalah itu pasti, Bapak Ibu. Nah, tetapi di kegiatan ini kita harus masalah dalam penelitian kita apa? Masalah dalam artikel kita. Berarti kalau kita nggak bisa neliti, nggak punya data, nggak bisa nulis artikel. Jawabannya iya, kecuali Bapak Ibu menulis artikel bibliometrik atau artikel review. Terus Bapak Ibu melakukan riset, terus naskah, terus artikel Bapak Ibu. Nah, kemarin komite Icelet memberikan tor kepada saya itu untuk membantu supaya sesuai template sih Bapak Ibu. Jadi supaya sesuai dengan template AP atau proceeding scopus yang Bapak Ibu pilih. Gitu Bapak Ibu. Jadi diawali dari masalah, melakukan riset atau penelitian, menulis naskah, terus jadi artikel Bapak Ibu. Nah, masalahnya itu isinya apa Pak? Jadi mengumpulkan masalah dari mana saja, dari lapangan, dari artikel, terus membuat daftar masalah, mengurutkan prioritas penyelesaian masalah, urgensi, dan dana. Terus memilih satu masalah saja. Jadi Bapak Ibu mohon pilih masalah yang paling tren atau yang bisa diselesaikan Bapak Ibu. Meneliti dilihat dari 3 hal, sisi otak, sisi waktu, dan sisi biaya Bapak Ibu. Terus Bapak Ibu melakukan riset, mengkaji pustaka untuk mengumpulkan solusi yang ada, membangun hipotesis untuk memperoleh solusi baru, merancang model teoritik atau eksperimen, menguji model teoritik dan melaksanakan eksperimen, lalu mengumpulkan dan menganalisis hasil. Nah, riset ini, jadi kalau nggak ada data ya nggak bisa ditulis Bapak Ibu. Makanya IMRAT di dalam sebuah format artikel itu IMRAT. IMRAT itu introduction, method, result, discuss, and conclusion Bapak Ibu. Gitu. Nah, yang kedua selanjutnya naskah. Naskah ini, ini ada 2 step. Bapak Ibu ada yang harus supaya kita pas dalam memahami, ada manuskrip, ada paper, ada artikel Bapak Ibu. Jadi bedanya apa Pak? Kalau manuskrip itu artikel atau tulisan yang belum dipublikasi. Maksudnya apa? Belum ditulis, belum di-online kan. Itu namanya manuskrip. Makanya Bapak Ibu ketika Yunani kuno atau sejarah Majapahit yang tidak dipublikasikan disebut manuskrip Bapak Ibu. Bapak Ibu bisa cek di KBBI. Terus kalau artikel yang akan ditulis namanya apa Pak? Manuskrip, sama karena belum dipublikasi. Naskah sama manuskrip sama Pak. Nah ini 11-12 Bapak Ibu. Sama. Kalau paper dengan full paper itu sama. Paper dengan artikel itu artinya artikel itu yang sudah terbit Bapak Ibu. Kalau manuskrip itu yang belum. Nah hari ini coaching ini kaitannya manuskrip saya nyebutnya, bukan paper Bapak Ibu atau artikel. Terus membuat cover letter, mengirimkan submit manuskrip ke editor jurnal, mendapatkan acknowledgement, menunggu 2 bulan atau lebih, menanyakan review report, melakukan revisi, memindahkan pengiriman, mendapatkan galeri, dan melakukan proofread. Terakhir, menuliskan akhir bermetamorfosis menjadi artikel. Jadi Bapak Ibu ada urutannya di dalam publikasi. Jadi setelah manuskrip itu jadi, Bapak Ibu submit. Setelah submit, maka akan ada review. Setelah review, ada accepted, terus publish it, Bapak Ibu. Nah, ini tahapan-tahapan yang harus dilalui. Termasuk di Icelet ini, Bapak Ibu sudah submit abstrak. Nanti diminta full paper, atau langsung call full paper, Bapak Ibu. Nah, diminta langsung full paper, berarti nanti di sana langsung direview, Bapak Ibu. Terus kontraknya AP ini dengan teman-teman Icelet dengan Atlantis Press berapa lama akan dipublish Bapak Ibu. Nah ini Bapak Ibu, komponen utama manuskrip. Yang pertama pendahuluan, metode, hasil dan pembahasan, result and discussion, and kesimpulan. Nah ini wajib Bapak Ibu. Jadi yang paling banyak itu harus di hasil dan pembahasan. Gitu. I'm sorry to Miss Moderator. Time masih ada untuk saya atau enough?
We have 10 minutes more.
10 minutes. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Okay. The component of manuscript, the introduction, method, result indicators, and conclusion, Bapak Ibu. Nah, this is the component, the part of the manuscript. The introduction. Introduction minimalis from the introduction. Satu paragraf berisi latar belakang dan masalah. Satu paragraf berisi apa yang telah dilakukan oleh peneliti lain dan kekurangannya. Satu paragraf gabung. Karena di sini kan ada tulisnya Bu. Bapak Ibu semua, all presenter Icelet, satu paragraf berisi apa yang telah dilakukan oleh para peneliti lainnya dan kekurangannya. Nah, berarti makanya istilahnya dalam kita meneliti itu kan bahasanya riset, dari 2 kata, harus kembali mencari. Artinya mencari kembali penelitian sebelumnya. Mencarinya di mana? Di portal-portal penyedia. Yang paling gampang Google Scholar. Gitu Bapak Ibu. Yang kedua metode teoritik atau eksperimental teoretik atau model eksperimental. Nah ini berisi penjabaran model teoretik yang telah dibangun atau dikembangkan Bapak Ibu. Nah ini teorinya seperti ini. Selanjutnya result and discuss. Result and discuss ini berisi hasil pengujian model teori atau hasil pelaksanaan eksperimen. Yang berikutnya hasil pembahasan dan pembandingan dengan hasil peneliti lainnya. Makanya di result itu menyampaikan hasil riset kita. Kalau discuss itu mengkomparkan, nyambung nggak dengan penelitian sebelumnya, mendukung nggak atau berkontradiksi. Jika kontradiksi jelaskan kenapa kontradiksi. Nah itu yang benar Bapak Ibu. Terus selanjutnya kesimpulan atau conclusion, berisi hal penting yang diperoleh dari pengujian model atau pelaksanaan eksperimen saja. Jadi kesimpulan itu menjawab rumusan masalah Bapak Ibu. Rumusan masalah di artikel kita apa? Terus Bapak Ibu tuliskan gitu. Nah, ini komponen utama manuskrip Bapak Ibu. Pertama title, yang kedua author and affiliation, yang ketiga abstrak. Nah, abstrak ini 200 sampai 300 kata. Rata-rata Bapak Ibu, ada yang maksimal 250, maksimal itu 350 saya menemukan. Ini tergantung template jurnal atau crossing yang dituju Bapak Ibu. Untuk judul, ini kata kuncinya jelas Bapak Ibu, menjabarkan subjek artikel yang jelas sebagai jendela yang mencolok mata. Makanya Bapak Ibu, judulnya jangan kayak rel kereta. Nah, terus yang kedua penulis dan afiliasi, berisi nama-nama penulis, alamat yang lengkap. Terus abstrak, berisi pendahuluan, metode, hasil pembahasan, serta kesimpulan. Gitu Bapak Ibu. Sebagai pintu masuk membaca artikel kita. Terus keyword kata kunci. Terus selanjutnya ucapan dan terima kasih atau acknowledgement, berisi utama terima kasih kepada orang atau badan yang telah berkontribusi, misalkan penyandang dana, ada mahasiswa yang bantuin, gitu. Terus reference atau daftar pustaka, berisi seluruh pustaka yang digunakan di tubuh manuskrip, mengikuti tata cara Harvard atau Vancouver. Kalau lampiran ini dibutuhkan jika Bapak Ibu meneruskan rumus atau ada lampiran instrumen dalam penelitian, Bapak Ibu. Nah, selanjutnya Bapak Ibu, ringkasan. Menulis artikel ilmiah bertujuan untuk mengkomunikasikan kepada komunitas pengetahuan. Artikel ilmiah memiliki gaya selingkung yang tipikalnya harus diikuti. Nah, ini contohnya Bapak Ibu. Nah, ini yang saya tulis sendiri Bapak Ibu lewat jurnal OPC Conference Series, lewat conference. Jadi MVM, ini kan tadi judul itu harus mencolok mata. Oh, saya buat namanya MVM, Microscopic Virtual Media in Basic Learning, Case Study in Student Understand of It Transfer. Nah, hal-hal yang mencolok mata itu judul harus dibuat Bapak Ibu. Nah, terus saya buat lagi MVS, Microscopic Virtual Simulation gitu ya. Nah, di sini Bapak Ibu, kita menuliskan Microscopic Virtual Simulation, jadi harus mencolok mata. Nah, ini saya buat di GMS, Dry Cell Microscopic Simulation to promote conceptual understanding about baterai, Bapak Ibu. Jadi di GMS ini saya buat simulasi kaitannya, kan selama ini kita tahu baterai kayak apa buat simulasinya gitu Bapak Ibu, perjalanan baterainya. Oke, Bapak Ibu, terima kasih di acara Icelet, anak-anak hidup dan tumbuh sesuai kodratnya sendiri. Pendidik hanya dapat merawat dan menuntut tumbuhnya kodrat itu. Ing aso sing tulodo ing mati mangun karso tutuwun diarani. Mohon izin Bapak Ibu kalau saya ngomongnya terlalu cepat dan mohon maaf jika ada yang kurang Bapak Ibu. Terima kasih sudah diberikan kesempatan berbagi di forum ini. Teknis penulisan artikel, semoga ada waktu lagi Bapak Ibu. Karena di sini saya mohon maaf karena masih visitasi Bapak Ibu, ini the expert to visit the laboratory. Okay, time is yours to moderator.
Yes, please give applause for our speakers today. Thank you, Mr. Firman, for your information and knowledge about how to write for Scopus. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it's just the beginning of our material from Mr. Firman, but Mr. Firman will come with us today for PM in the afternoon. Yes, Mr. Firman?
Yes.
Mr. Firman will teach us directly how to write in Scopus. Thank you so much, Mr. Firman. We will wait you here. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, the next agenda is parallel session announcement by Miss Uswatun Hasana Aimin. So, Miss Uswatun, time is yours.
Okay, bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I am Uswatun Hasana, and I will explain the rules of parallel session. For the first, parallel session will be held in a hybrid from 13 until 15 o'clock p.m. So the second, online presenters will be placed in the breakout room on Zoom, and for all offline presenters will be placed in the Topaz room, which is located on the second floor. So the third parallel session will be guided by a moderator, and the presenters must be present 15 minutes on Zoom before the parallel session start. And the fifth, presenters can rename their account to a name and room number. For example, Ernie underscore room 1. So the sixth, the presentation maximum 5 slides and consists of introduction, research method, result, and conclusion. So the presenters have to share the slide of PowerPoint by themselves. So every presenters have 10 minutes for presentation, also discussion. And all presenter have to turn off the microphone and turn on the camera on the Zoom. Baik Bapak Ibu, untuk yang luring, jadi pada jam 1 sampai jam 3 itu kita ada 2 kegiatan. Kegiatan yang pertama yaitu rapat tahunan yang akan diadakan di Ballroom 3, dan untuk parallel session khusus yang luring akan diadakan di Topaz Room. Topaz Room itu adanya di depan lift lantai 2, itu tinggal ke arah kiri ya Bapak Ibu ya. Dan itu kita sampai jam 3, dan setelahnya jam 4 kita akan kembali lagi di Ballroom 3, kita akan menyimak kembali coaching klinik ya, coaching klinik oleh Bapak Dr. Firmanul Catur Wibowo. Baik, terima kasih, thank you, assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you so much for Ms. Uswatun for leading us about the parallel section. The next agenda is a break time, ladies and gentlemen. So we will back to this room for seminar at 1 o'clock. Okay, thank you so much. Now it's break time. See you again. Thank you.
Bagi bapak-bapak yang akan melaksanakan
Recording stopped.